Really, all of it changed when I was a junior in high school and my parents decided to separate, which was totally unforeseen. Within a matter of 2 weeks, my house went from 4 people to 2. I knew that it just wasn't going to be the same going forward. We didn't know what a true father and son relationship was like and how rich and deep that could become. Jesus wanted to win those things first, because if he could have my heart and my thoughts, he could have everything else. I said, God, I messed up, and I don't know what to do, but I know I need you right now. That was the moment where Keith Golightly died and Keith Golightly in Christ came alive.
Keith Golightly, thanks for coming out, man.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to get into your story, man. You've shared a little bit of it at different points. I know there's some kind of heavy stuff in there, and we kind of talked about it offline. And it's weird to say, but I'm kind of excited to dig into that, because it's really where God really tends to show up a lot, and during the rough times, the heavy times. Yeah. But I don't mean to insinuate that it's going to be like a depressing time for you or anything like that. Uh-huh. So, let me go ahead and just give you a quick intro, and then we'll just kind of jump into it.
Cool.
Okay. Keith Golightly, you are a U.S. Army veteran serving from 2014 to 2022. A little over half of that was in special operations with deployments to Iraq, Syria, and Jordan. Your last position was serving as a Squadron Deputy XO with Joint Special Operations Command, or JSOC. You came to Christ in college, and after leaving the military, you were ordained and served as a young adults pastor at Grace Church in Southern Pines, North Carolina. You've recently transitioned to the role of associate pastor. You've been married to your wife, Taryn, for 10 years, coming on 11. You have 2 kids together, and of course, above all of that, you are a disciple of Christ, and you are a disciple maker.
Come on, yep. Well, yeah.
All right, man. So, like I said, I'm excited to kind of hear your story, because I've only heard a little bit of it.
Yeah.
So let's just wind it back, man. Let's go all the way back. So
yeah,
I know you grew up in Texas, right?
That's right.
What part?
The Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Dallas-Fort Worth.
Yeah, the Metroplex.
Okay. And you were born there? Or?
That's right. Born and raised.
Okay.
Yeah. All the way until we PCS'd here to North Carolina.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So all through, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So college and everything.
Yep.
What was home life like?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, I was not churched at all. I didn't grow up in a godly family. We, really the only times we went to church was maybe we went to a Catholic church for weddings and funerals, but that was really it. I remember when I was a little kid going to Sunday school, I actually got kicked out of Sunday school, and that's a whole story in and of itself. But I ended up, this kid, I have vague memory of it, but I remember this kid took a toy that I was playing with, and I ended up hitting him in the face. And then the Sunday school teacher pulled me out and then brought my parents in too. And then they asked us to leave, and we never went back.
Wow.
So yeah, but other than that, completely unchurched. I grew up in public school, elementary, middle, high school. And then, so yeah, I mean, my childhood was pretty, I would say average. I would say that's the word I would describe it. It was pretty average, middle class. It wasn't crazy, I guess exciting or even traumatic in a lot of ways. It was pretty just consistent. But then, not a lot of it. Really, all of it changed when I was a junior in high school and my parents decided to separate, which was totally unforeseen. I have an older brother. It was just the 2 of us in our house with our parents, and both of us didn't know that was going to happen. There was really no symptoms leading up to our parents making that decision. It was a shock, and it was interesting because my brother at the time, he was graduating high school and he was on his way to college. So when my parents separated, with like 2 weeks later, he left for college. So we as siblings didn't really have a lot of time to process that event in our lives. Even still to this day, we haven't really had a lot of conversation about it. And so, but with me, I was still in high school. And so what happened is that my mom left my dad. She decided to, she moved out of the house and got a condo in a neighboring town in Arlington, Texas, leaving my dad and I just to ourselves. It was me, him, and our dog. And that was very different. So within a matter of 2 weeks, my house went from 4 people to 2. And it's just a massive shift. And my parents' relationship, my relationship with them was never the same after that. And, we obviously later the Lord came in and healed a lot of things, but I mean, I knew that it just wasn't going to be the same going forward for the rest of my life,
Yeah. So how far away is Arlington? I spent a lot of time in Texas, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I just don't know. Know
So my dad's house is in Grand Prairie, Texas,
Mm.
which is like, if you look at a map of DFW, Grand Prairie is like smack in the middle between Dallas and Fort Worth.
Okay.
And then Arlington's literally just right next to that.
Okay.
Kind of leaning towards the Fort Worth side.
Okay. So it's close enough to still kind of see your mom a lot, but also like
yes,
also close enough to make it weird that she's right there, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And,
So she was still my mom,
mm-hmm.
just wasn't present as much. And if I wanted to go see her, I had to drive down I-20 just to go see her. And it was just kind of odd. Like my parents didn't go to court about it. They just did it amongst themselves. There was no child support because there was no minors involved. No, that's correction. I was 16 when that happened. So technically I was a minor, but they didn't pay child support. None of that happened. My parents agreed that my dad would transfer money to my mom through my personal bank account, which made things really weird. So like one day, like I would have this amount, and then the next day I'd see this amount, and I didn't know if I could touch it or not, so it was just really weird. But yeah, they just worked it out just between them two, and they were very cordial about it. Obviously there was a lot of emotions, especially with my dad. My goodness, man, just seeing my dad go through every emotion you can imagine with something like that. I mean, there was confusion, there was anger, frustration, emptiness, bitterness, depression, all of it, and even suicidal attempts, that happened with my dad. And just witnessing him go through all of that, I mean, it's interesting. There's books out there about processing grief, but grief is just one of those things you can't put a metric on it. That's something you can't measure. It's an aspect of the human condition that you just can't put a measuring stick on something like that. And so just seeing my dad process that himself and seeing how he handled that was hard for me as his son, because before that, I didn't see him go through anything like that before. So,
were you guys close?
But before the divorce, we weren't incredibly close. And obviously we lived together, and we got along for the most part, but we weren't very intimate. Like I would say I loved him, but it didn't really, it wasn't out of like a sincere heart. And obviously we didn't know Jesus, so we didn't really know what true love was. We didn't know what a true father and son relationship was like, and how rich and deep that could become. That wasn't really something we thought about or valued in the home. And so it was more transactional than it was relational.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times, I think, sadly, when people, especially in families, say, I love you, it's really more, they're saying, I don't hate you.
Right. But I tolerate you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm okay with you being here most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. I'm not saying that that's what it was for you, but,
right.
But it does seem to be kind of a common thing. Because like you said, it's until you really understand what actual love looks like. Yes. I mean, how can you mean it?
Yes. Right.
Anyway, so while you were 16 when they split, and I'm sorry, I missed that. You have siblings?
Yeah, just one older brother.
One older brother.
Yeah,
so he was already
he's
gone.
3 years older.
Okay. So he was 19. He was already gone,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. He was off in college or?
Yeah, so he went to UTA,
Okay.
University of Texas in Arlington.
Okay.
So he was still kind of local, but he lived in a dorm on campus. So he was out of the house.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So that was just weird, just one day, just waking up and like rooms echo that didn't used to echo and things
Pretty
like
much,
that.
man. Yeah. And I remember when my parents divorced, also what I saw in my dad, he made a lot of very sudden changes with his interests and changes in the house, changes in how like the home dynamic. So for example, I remember my dad randomly just one day wanted to replace the ceilings in the home because we had popcorn ceilings.
Okay.
And of course that's, no one has that anymore.
Right.
And my dad hated popcorn ceilings. And so he just felt like because his wife wasn't in the house anymore, there was no one there to say no or delay the desire to do something like that.
Sure.
And so I remember it looked like our house was quarantined, bro. I mean, we had plastic sheets everywhere, and my dad is up there shaving the popcorn ceiling, and he wanted this new texture. And I remember he wanted to sell his truck and get a different car. He was thinking about getting a different job. And so he just made all of these sudden changes in his life. And of course, I was kind of on the receiving end of that. I'm like, man. And so like, that was a shock too, just trying to like all of this happening while processing the grief.
Yeah, sure.
And so that was interesting too.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to settle into a new change when it's still changing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a lot, man.
Yep.
What does your dad do what did he do at the time?
Yeah, so he's a bodyman, so he works at a collision center working on cars.
Cool.
He's a technician.
Okay.
Yeah, he's been doing that really his whole life.
That's a cool job,
ever since I've been born. He's been working on cars. And so my dad, just a little bit about him, he's got a really big background in racing cars. So his dad, my grandpa, he was a race car driver. He wasn't like NASCAR or anything, but he would race dirt. If you're familiar with like sprint cars or bombers, he would race those. And so growing up, my dad would like watch NASCAR, sometimes Formula One, anything that had to do with racing, my dad was really into. And so he was always surrounded by cars, motors. He would restore cars. I remember when I was in middle school, he came home one day from work. He had his trailer attached to the back of his F-150, and on the trailer was this ugly junkyard 1966 Mustang.
Nice.
And we were all looking out of the windows of the house like, look at this thing. And we all knew what he wanted to do with it. And so 2 years later, $17,000 later, he restored this car, and it was beautiful. It's cherry red. He put a 302 V8 in it. It's got 2 carburetors. The sucker is loud, man. It's got Flowmaster exhaust, custom wheels and interior. And I barely touched that car. Like, I think the only thing he had me help him with on it was chipping off the rust. That was it. Yeah, he did everything else.
Wow.
So he is a car whiz. Yeah. And so, I mean, he's still doing that today.
Is he still down in Texas? Or?
He is, yeah. Yeah, he works at a collision center in Arlington, and he's been there for, gosh, I want to say like 20 years or something.
Wow.
But he's going to retire. In our last conversation about retirement, I think he's going to retire in the next couple of years. Yeah, he talked about getting an RV, and he's going to keep his house, but certain seasons of the year, he's going to jump in the RV. Him and his girlfriend, they're kind of common law married, but and she lives with him right now. But they're going to get an RV together and just travel around the country, and then probably rent out the house whenever they're out doing that.
But before the divorce,
Mm-hmm.
so basically from up to like age 15, I guess, everything was just kind of like just a normal childhood. Like,
yeah, man. Yeah, I was just like your average American boy, dude.
Okay.
Just doing normal boy stuff, riding the bike around the neighborhood, getting into certain things, hanging out with friends. And I started to do ROTC in high school. And that's where my love for the military started, actually. And funny fact, so the only reason why I did ROTC in high school is because I needed a PE credit. Whenever I left middle school to go to high school, and all the students are looking at the list of extracurriculars of what they could do in high school, we all needed a PE credit. And I didn't want to do PE class because I just didn't like that. I didn't want to do any sports because I wasn't into any sports. And so I'm like, what am I going to do? And so I saw junior ROTC on there, and I'm like, what is that? And so I remember looking over to my friend who was over to my side. I was like, hey, do you know what this is? He's like, oh yeah, it's kind of like Boy Scouts. You wear a uniform, you march around and stuff. And I was like, hey man, if it gets me PE credit, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And I remember the first couple of years of doing that, I didn't know it within me, but I was like, man, this is something I could possibly do as a future, just doing army stuff. And I remember growing up, my mom was like, you're never going to join the army. I don't want you going out and going to war. And, but the more I did that stuff, the more I was really interested in it. I was interested in the uniform and like the army way of doing things and the culture and all of that. And so early on, and this was actually a very comforting thought as a young teenager, because you probably know as well as I do, a lot of young adults nowadays, dude, like even in their 30s, they don't even know what they want to do in their life. You go to university campuses and so many college students don't know what to do with their lives. And so they're switching majors and they're trying to figure out, with me early on, I knew that the military was something that I really wanted to do. And so after high school, I continued ROTC in college with the intention of commissioning as an officer. That was my goal. And the Lord allowed me to do that.
So what kind of stuff were you into kind of, I guess, leading up to high school? Because it sounds like once you got to, like you were saying, or you said, okay, in high school you did JROTC. Uh-huh. So obviously there you just explained that's kind of where you kind of got the eye toward the military. But before that, were you like, did you play sports? Were you an outdoors kid or?
Yeah. So, I was really never that kid who was into team sports that consisted of a ball, like football, basketball, baseball. I don't know, man. I just really was never into it. And my parents are always kind of confused about that, cause they're into football, and growing up in Texas, it's like, dude, you better be into football.
Sure.
Or how are you going to survive? And of course, we're all Cowboys fans, And so, but like, anytime I played sports like that, I just never really had fun. I wasn't interested in it. But yeah, as a kid, I definitely was outside a lot. I'm a 90s boy, so we're outside riding bikes. I was really into bikes. I was into airsoft at one point,
Nice.
paintball, skateboarding, scooters. So the street I grew up on in Grand Prairie, there were other homes on our street that had kids that were similar to me and my brother's age. And so actually one of my best friends was right across the street from my dad's house. And all of us neighborhood kids would get together and we'd all do the same stuff together. So we all got into skateboarding at the same time. We all got into scooters at the same, like the Razor scooters that fold, whenever that came out, we got into that. We all got into rollerblading. Dude, we would build ramps in our backyards and we would just, injure ourselves, And so when airsoft came out, we got into that. And then going back to the whole like car thing with my dad. So my dad got us go-karts, and dude, we would drive go-karts all around the neighborhood. So that was a thing. But it was kind of funny. Like in my childhood, it was like fads back to back, just growing up as a kid. So
something you kind of said a minute ago, and that just kind of dovetails into what you're talking about here a little bit. It just reminded me, like, so when Will Johnson was sitting there, and that'll come out probably just before this one, but it's actually been a good little while since we sat down. But he said something that he was expressing a kind of train of thought that is something that I just kind of have lived in for a very long time. But he was talking about, for his particular situation, he was like, yeah, when I carried my kids, the last time I carried my kids down the hallway, when they were little and like carrying weight and size and all that, he's like, I didn't know that was going to be the last time.
Yeah.
Did that. And it just reminds me, you're talking about when your parents split, like the last time you guys woke up and had breakfast as a family, like you didn't know.
Yeah,
that
man.
Probably nobody knew. It's just a moment that kind of passes. There's no I&W, right? There's no indications and warnings. There's no alert. There's no, hey, heads up, like remember this because it's not happening again. You know what I mean? And it just kind of reminded me of that, especially talking about like, all your friends as a kid, because that's a sentiment you see sometimes kind of circling around the internet. or someone will kind of just point out that like, hey, at one point you went outside to play with all your friends for the last time, and nobody ever, nobody knew it,
I've seen those reels. It's kind of a thing now. Like, moms going up to their sons and being like, "Hey, can I hold you one last time?" And then, and so actually my wife did that with our daughter. She's 7. And of course, as a 7-year-old, I mean, we're still going to pick her up, especially me as her dad.
Yeah.
I'll probably pick her up when she's 20,
Right.
But as a 7-year-old, she's getting tall, she's getting big and heavy. And at some point, my wife's not going to like pick her up all the time, nor maybe she doesn't want to be picked up. And so she made a video of, it was the same thing. She went up to our daughter and was like, "Hey, can I hold you?" And she was holding her. So
that's very cool, man.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah. That's man, and it's something I'm sure we'll get into in a bit when we start moving into like deployments and stuff. Because you were married through, at least most of your deployments, right?
Through all of them.
Through all of them. Okay, so
not I didn't have kids through all of them.
Okay,
but married, yes.
Okay, so then you get it absolutely. Like for me, like I said, that's kind of a headspace that I've lived in for a long time. But especially after getting married, or really just after we were kind of brought together, just like, and I'll try to hold it together because it's really hard to talk about, but like, it's never very far at all from the very front of my mind that one day I'm going to look at my wife for the last time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to hear her voice for the last time, and I don't know if that's going to be a young face or a young voice or an old, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so, when we, like I said, I'm sure you understand, and maybe we'll get into it when we start talking about deployments, but back when I was working and I would be, gone just all the time, just always gone. And there's a thing that I'm sure you're very familiar with, very common. It's like, hey, I'm supposed to go home like a week or whatever. And you get the call, "Hey man, we need to extend you for a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is." Mm-hmm. It's never long. Or at least in my case, it wasn't long. It did happen quite frequently though. But like, so from a planning, decision-making, even operational perspective, it makes sense.
Yes.
And I 100% get it and support it. Like, and cause a whole lot of the time I was by myself as a singleton anyway. Mm-hmm. So like, hey, something came up, something happened over here in this country, or is going to, we need you there to take care of it. Right. It just makes sense instead of bringing somebody else in and trying to, and like, I'm already there. Folks at the embassies know me, the fixers. I've got a good, relationship with them. I know all the kind of tribal knowledge. It makes sense. I get it. But every time that happened, man, it's like a little piece of me died, because it's like, it's just, dude, that's a week. Yeah. That is like whether it's, I don't know what it's going to look like, obviously, but at the end of this thing, whether it's in this life and I find myself here in the world without my wife, or if it's on the other side, like, no matter what, I am going to, the one thing I'm going to want is just a little bit more time. Mm-hmm. And dude, a week is, that's like an eternity when, like, when
especially back home.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And like, and to have that week when you're young and you're vibrant, and you're like, just laugh like maniacs at silly stuff. Like, that's the best of it,
Yeah, so for sure.
Anyway, sorry, I don't really remember what got me on that tangent, but it's, some of the things you were talking about kind of reminded me of that sentiment. I guess I was just kind of pulling that thread. Yeah. I understand what you're talking about when you say like your whole world just kind of, was just different, And I don't mean to kind of dig into kind of hard stuff to talk about or think about, but I see you.
Yeah, no, you're good. Yeah. And dude, we can get as deep as you want, because where I'm at, dude, the Lord has delivered me from so much. In fact, the Keith that lived that situation, frankly, is dead. Because that Keith was, the old creation is gone, the new has come, and I'm telling you, man, when the Lord met me, that was such a radical and real and raw situation. I mean, it was. Some people say, as they walk with Jesus, it's kind of like a progression, and certainly, that's where you talk about sanctification and the process of being like Christ. But for me, when I encounter the presence of God, it was like a night and day difference. Sure, I still had struggles and all of that. I wasn't like, God didn't zap me in holiness, right? But when I encountered his presence and his glory, literally the next day, the things that I desired, the things I was hungry for, the things that drove me, the things that I was passionate about totally changed. And I was turned off to a lot of that stuff, like the music I was listening to, the clothes I was wearing. I felt dirty almost. And I remember, and we can get into this later, but I remember going up to my small group leader, who was a fellow college student. He was like 4 or 5 years older than me, but he was a student on the campus. And he was the one who discipled me and who taught me about Jesus and the Bible and the character of God. And I just went to him for all of that. I remember one day I went into, and this was like maybe a week after my encounter, I gave him a flash drive, and I went into his apartment. He always kept his front door unlocked. Like people would just come and go in his apartment. I walked into his apartment with his flash drive, and I walked into his bedroom. I put the flash drive on his desk. He had like a loft. There's a bed with a desk underneath, and he was doing homework. I put the flash drive on his desk, and I said, "Give me all of your Jesus music." I call it Jesus music. I was like, "Give me all your Jesus music that you have," and he was like, "Done." And so, this was the day of LimeWire. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Like you just like bootleg music,
Yeah.
And so I didn't, dude. I was listening to bands like Korn, Slipknot, Disturbed, Static X, Avenged Sevenfold, System of a Down. Like those were the stuff that I was into at the time, and I just wasn't hungry for that anymore. I wanted the stuff that these Christian dudes that I'd found. I wanted their stuff because they're singing about real stuff. They're living for real stuff, and I knew that the music they listened to and the books they read and the people they hung out with, the thoughts they had, that stuff was feeding them, and they had something that I didn't have. And the more I hung out with them, the more I wanted those things for myself. And so I was like, "Hey, give me all your music." And so I just, that was just like step one of many that led me to help experience that transformation, the renewal of the mind that Paul talks about, in the scriptures.
So you had, I don't mean to jump ahead.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll back up. Maybe we'll see. But at that point, you had already been saved, or you were just kind of working on it. You're
Yes.
on the way.
So what happened was, so after the divorce,
Mm-hmm.
it was just me and my dad for like a year and a half, because that divorce happened in the middle of my junior year of high school. And so I wrote out the rest of my junior year, and then I did senior year, right? And the summer after my senior year, I started my freshman year at university, and I went to Sam Houston State University. It's like an hour north of Houston, which is like 2.5 hours south of DFW. So it wasn't like out of state, but I was distant enough from my family. I was on my own in a lot of respects, but it was crazy, man. As soon as I landed on the campus, so like, and literally the day I moved into my dorm, which my dad helped me move in. It was just me and him. As we're moving in, I met a guy who was a student on the campus, and he was there to help freshmen move into their dorms. And his name's Josh. And so Josh helped us move into the dorm. And as I didn't know this at the time, but Josh was a part of a campus ministry. And Josh walked with God. And he again, I didn't know it at first, but as he was getting to know me, he was trying to connect me to this ministry and potentially a small group or something. He's kind of like low key about it. And but on the surface level, he's just helping me move into my dorm. He's just being a nice guy. And so as we're moving in and making all the trips from my dad's truck to the room, we're just getting to know each other. And by the time we were done, Josh and I exchanged phone numbers, and he was the first person I met on the campus. And so see, Joshua was smart, because what he was doing, he was meeting a bunch of freshmen on the campus and then inviting them into for a hangout at his apartment. And that was like maybe a few nights later. But Josh texted me. He's like, "Hey man, I'm having a party at my place. You're invited, and he's the only guy I know so far." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm here trying to make friends." And so Now, when I read party, I'm thinking, oh, booze
Yeah, sure.
and loud music, whatever.
Yeah, it's college, right?
Yeah, right. And so I show up. Added detail. At this point in time, I was dating a girl who I met at orientation. It wasn't my wife yet, but different girl. I was dating her. I met her at orientation, and so here's the crazy part. She met a female who helped her move into her dorm. And the lady that helped her was a part of the same ministry as Josh was.
Oh, okay.
And so things are, it's happening to us at the same time. She was invited to the same party. So we ended up going together. So we go to this party, and it was at Josh's apartment. And some things I noticed about this party, there was no alcohol. The music was clean. It wasn't like this dirty rap music. You know what I mean? Something else I noticed is that all the guys were like hanging out in one corner of the apartment, and all the girls were hanging out in the other corner, and so like this was not like the normal college party scene, but I liked it, and it was actually nice, and it was refreshing. I was like, okay, I could do this, because even before the Lord, I wasn't really a party guy, yeah, I could maybe be in a scene like that and tolerate it, but I didn't like chase after that stuff. And so after that night, I realized, okay, Josh and his friends and these girls over here, they're different. They're not these crazy party type. And the more I hung out with Josh and the guys he was hanging out with, the more I wanted to hang out with them, And so I wasn't a Christian yet. I'm kind of just tasting and seeing, right? I knew they were Christian. That was pretty obvious because all they talked about was Jesus, man. Like literally all they wanted to talk about was God. And to me, they did it in such a way where it didn't come off as religious. It didn't come off as weird or like culty, They were just genuine. They were just honest. They were honest about their lives. They were honest about their thoughts. They were honest about just themselves. Like they were just easy and real. And that was so refreshing, man, because maybe the way you grew up, I don't know, but like when you're in public school and all the stuff you deal with in public school, people wear masks. There's a lot of phoniness. There's all that drama, and so to be around a people like this was really, really refreshing. And these were guys who frankly had heaven in their eyes. They would talk about Jesus like they just got off the phone with him. And again, like it just wasn't weird to me. And I was kind of like, I felt like an observer sitting on the sidelines, watching something that I was really interested in, but not willing enough to be a part of it myself quite yet. And then, so this was going on for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. This is all before classes started because that's how early I moved into my dorm. And I'm getting into like the testimony now a little bit. But through Josh, I met a different guy named Taylor. And Taylor, I'm going to talk about him a lot because he means everything to me. Because Taylor was the guy who really and truly discipled me. I mean, he was the guy who fought for me, who served me, who loved me like no one else has ever loved me before. He would want to hang out with me all the time. And when I think of a real disciple maker, and I'm talking like a soul winner, someone who fights for people's souls, like fights for people's future, that's Taylor. That's who he was. That's the kind of walk with God he had and the burdens that he carried, And so I met Taylor through Josh at a separate campus event. There was like this big game on the campus, and I met Taylor. When I first saw Taylor, it was kind of cool. So Taylor, he's a taller guy. He's got dark hair. He's not like crazy fit, but he's got a tall, broad stature, And when I first saw him, he was wearing a Superman t-shirt. Like it was like a blue t-shirt with the Superman logo on it, and he had a red towel tucked into the collar, so it was like his cape, And when I saw him, he just looked like an interesting guy. And I was like, I got to talk to him. So I just went up to him knowing that he knew Josh. I was like, hey, man, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Keith. I saw you from over there. You just seem like a cool guy. and he was just super. And I can just see it on his countenance. There's just something different about him. Anyway, so I started hanging out with Taylor, and I got to know him really, really well. And so maybe 2 weeks went by, and Taylor started inviting me to his small group. That's what he called it, small group. And, growing up unchurched, I didn't know what those terms meant. I was like, okay, small group, whatever. And so I go to his apartment, and it's me, some other guys that have met Taylor, and we're just talking about the Bible. And at this point in time, dude, I don't know anything about the Bible. Like, I thought Psalm was pronounced P-Psalm, I thought the dude who built the ark jumped off of it was swallowed by a whale. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know anything about the Bible. And, but the way Taylor taught it, the way he presented it, he did it in such a way where he always pointed it to the character of God. And that's all he wanted to talk about was Jesus and who he was to him, to us. And I wanted more of that, man. I just got really hungry for that stuff and like a really keen interest. I wasn't saved yet. I wasn't quite there, but my interest in it was rising. And so it wasn't until, I can't pinpoint the date, but it wasn't until August or September of 2010. So the ministry that Josh and Taylor were a part of was called Chi Alpha, which it sounds like a fraternity, but it's not. It's Chi Alpha is the letters are XA, but it's short for I think it's Christi Apolliosto, which is Latin for Christ ambassadors. So that's what the name Chi Alpha means, Christ ambassadors. So Chi Alpha is real quick. They're a ministry that's they're affiliated with the Assemblies of God. And they're pioneered by college students for college students. It is strictly a campus ministry, and they're primarily present on secular campuses. So they're not like a Bible college ministry or anything like that. Yeah. But they're all over the nation. There's even Chi Alphas in like Europe and Asia. Oh, wow. Yeah. They're pretty big. But little did I know that the university that I went to had the largest Chi Alpha in America. They were around two. So the student body at Sam Houston State University at the time when I was there was 19,000 students. It's much more now because they've grown a lot as a university. But when I was there, it was 19,000. 2,000 of those students were a part of Chi Alpha. And so when I didn't know it until later, but when I arrived on the campus, I pretty much arrived at a time where God was moving in a major way. I mean, college students were getting saved left and right. There's this huge explosion of discipleship happening with this ministry. And the people, here's the cool part. The people that were making the disciples, it wasn't the pastors who led the ministry. It was the college students. This ministry was literally made up of small groups. And so Taylor was just one of, I think like 100 other small group leaders on the campus. And they were just college students. Like, they don't have any degrees. They don't work at a church. They're not staff like I am at Grace. They're just people who love the Lord and they want to make disciples, man.
There's something special about that, man. Not diminishing the role of, pastors and things like that, but there's really something just kind of sincere and like I said, just special about that when you're just doing it for the love of the game. You know what I mean?
Man. And I'd never seen anything like that before. Again, just growing up unchurched and everything. And so I learned very quickly that I was like, okay, I'm surrounded by a lot of guys and girls who are real about Jesus, and they're serious about Jesus, not in a spiritual, like, jerky way, like a Pharisee kind of way, but they were just very zealous for Jesus, man. And they were very challenging too. Like, they would ask very challenging questions. Taylor would do this thing where he would randomly text me throughout the day, and the text would be like, "Hey man, what are you thinking about?" That's it. And I'm like, and he would do that to help me practice cultivating a thought life. Like the Bible talks a lot about like the renewal of the mind, loving Jesus with our minds, right? And so there's something to be said about having a rich thought life, having Jesus consume your thoughts. lending your thoughts over to him always and nothing else. And so with Taylor texting me those questions, he was helping me practice that. Like, oh man, like what am I thinking about? Because whatever I think about is going to determine everything after that. It's like that age-old saying that your thoughts make your words make your actions make your habits, and then your habits form your destiny. I mean, that's real, but it's all rooted in the thoughts. And so Taylor was after my thought life, but he was showing me that it wasn't really just him, it was Jesus really after that too. And so literally from the inside out, from my thoughts, from my heart, Taylor was discipling me in a way where Jesus wanted to win those things first, because if he could have my heart and my thoughts, he could have everything else, all of the external stuff, my words, my clothes, your
music.
Yeah, like all that stuff, but it's got to start from the inside. And so, all right. So again, it was either August or September of 2010, but there was a worship service that happened at Chi Alpha. So Chi Alpha, they didn't have their own venue. So what they did is that they met at a First Assemblies of God church that was just right off the campus. It was like down the road, but it was a church that could house all of these students. They had 2 services, kind of like how Grace has 3. They would have 2 services back to back because there's so many college students. And so I went to one of these Thursday night services. And now I wasn't saved quite yet, but Taylor's inviting me to this service, and so I went with him. And this is like the first time I set foot in a church in years, And mind you, I was used to the Catholic expression, so I'm walking in this building expecting to see like a crucifix on the wall, the candles on the table, the big giant open Bible, and I walk into this place and I don't see any of that. I see big old speakers, I see a guitar, a bass guitar, drum set, and I'm like, okay, like this is kind of cool. I remember having those thoughts, and I'm such an infant at this point. Like I have zero exposure to the church, or like the Protestant expression. Mm-hmm. And so I'm in this church building, and there's college students everywhere. Taylor's having me meet his friends, and so the countdown begins. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I don't know what to expect. And so we find a row of chairs. We sit in the chairs, and this band steps on the stage, and there's this guy picks up the guitar. He starts talking in the mic, and he's like, hey, welcome to Chi Alpha. Let's stand up and worship the Lord. And I'm like, what's that? And so I'm just like observing, and I see people with hands in the air. I see people. The sermon hasn't even started yet, and college students are already leaving their chairs to go to the altar and pray.
Wow.
And of course, I don't know what an altar is. And what's funny, you're going to laugh, dude. When people walked up to pray, I didn't even know they were praying. I'm like, what are they doing? They're laying on the ground.
Cookies down there or something?
Yeah. I'm like, they call it sucking carpet,
Okay, yeah.
But I just see people like laying on their bellies, getting on their knees, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, I am so new to all of this. It's crazy. And so I just didn't know what worship was. Worship, and that's something you take for granted sometimes. You're like, coming back to discipleship, that's something you have to teach someone to do. Like, how do you worship? What is worship? Why do we worship? And so I'm new to all of this. It's like I'm on a different planet, And so the worship's going on, and then finally the preacher gets up there and he preaches a message. But here's where things start shifting for me, because I remember this so clearly. He preached the paint off the walls, and what he was preaching on was the parable of the prodigal son.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and dude, it was just one of the. Have you ever heard a sermon and you just feel like the dude is preaching to you, and no one else in the room? Yep. That's what it felt like. I mean, there were maybe 400 or 500 other college students in that room, but I felt like the words were for me and me alone. And so I'm sitting there, and for the first time in my life, I'm feeling the conviction of the Holy Spirit. And I didn't know it was conviction, but I knew something was speaking to me, and something was moving in me, and I could totally relate to what he was saying, because with the divorce and all of that baggage that I had and all the bitterness that I had, I stepped into college just carrying all that stuff in my heart, not really realizing it, but it was eating me away. And so he was preaching on this parable, but when he did it, he wasn't focusing on the son that ran away. He was focusing on the father. And he actually went on to say, he actually retitled the parable. He didn't call it the parable of the prodigal son. He called it the parable of the father's heart. And he was zooming in on the Father and relating it to the Heavenly Father and the love that he has for us, when we become stupid and selfish and we run away, And I remember after that sermon, so Chi Alpha always had really big altar calls. And so they opened up the altar at the end, and we had a time of response. And I just remember seeing the college students go up, and they're praying, and there's people up there praying over people, and there was just something in my soul, man, that it was almost like a tug, like something was tugging me, and I needed to go up there. It wasn't like a voice or anything. I just felt like this urge, this internal urge that I needed to leave my seat, go up there, and just do something with what I heard. And so I walked up there. Now Taylor was standing next to me, like the small group that because we sat together as a small group. And so I just walked up, and I didn't know what to do, man. And so I just kind of looked around, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do what everyone else is doing. So this is the first time I've ever prayed in my life, dude. It felt so awkward, but yet it felt so right, And so I remember I got on my knees, and there was a cross on the wall, like on the back wall behind the stage. And I remember just looking at the cross because Eli was mentioning the cross in his sermon. And for the first time, I talked to God, dude. And I said, God, I messed up, and I don't know what to do, but I know I need you right now. And, dude, I just remember in that moment, so you know how sometimes when we talk about the glory of God, the glory is weight, like the word glory in the Greek means weight. I literally felt a weight, like like the air got heavy, like someone turned up the gravity. Like I just felt this heaviness just pressing me down to the point I wasn't really on my knees anymore. I was kind of on my knees and elbows. Wow. I'm lowered. Like God humbled me in a sense. And when that happened, dude, I started crying for the first time, dude. I'm weeping before the presence of God. And I just had all this pent up just stuff, and it just needed to be released. And then I started weeping, and I'm like, and I'm thinking about my mom, I'm thinking about my dad, I'm thinking about my brother, and I'm like, God, I need you. I want you. I don't want this anymore. I want my old life. I don't want my old friends, as cruel as that might sound, I don't want that. I want what you have for me, because clearly it's best. And so as I'm laying there, I felt someone's hand press on my back, and it was Taylor. And so he's over me, praying over me, and I could hear his voice like saying words over me, and I'm just losing it, man. I'm just losing it. And when I felt Taylor's hand, the Lord gave me a vision. He gave me an image. For the first time, dude, this happened. The first time I got an image. And what the image was, I saw this, it was almost like a statue. It was like this marble statue, but it was in like a human silhouette. There was no face on it, but it was like a silhouette marble statue. And when I saw that image, I heard the Lord's voice for the first time. And he told me, he says, hey, this is what you look like to me right now. You are hard-hearted, you're bitter, you're prideful, and I can't do anything with that. I can't mold that because it's already hard. And then in the image, this statue just suddenly melted into a puddle. And when that happened, I felt that weight again, And again, I'm still crying. And then when I saw the puddle, I heard the Lord spoke again, and he says, this is where I'm putting you now. I've humbled you. And from this, I'm going to remold you. I'm going to reshape you. And I was like, okay, Lord. And dude, after receiving that image, that for me, that was my deliverance moment. That was the moment where Keith Golightly died and Keith Golightly in Christ came alive. And like that internal resurrection moment. I mean, and so earlier I said it was radical and real. That was it, man. That's why it was so radical. I mean, just emotionally, spiritually. I mean, there's just a lot going on in that single point in time. And again, Taylor praying over me, receiving the vision, hearing his voice, and I mean, it was just this wave that I just didn't know was going to come. And this altar call was going on for a while, you know. I mean, they're pretty spirit filled at Chi Alpha. So, and so anyway, so when the service was over, dude, I just felt light. You know, I felt this weight off of me. I felt like airy. That might be a weird word to use, but I just felt so light, you know, and refreshed. And I remember that same night, I called my dad. And sorry, no, let me back up. I called my mom first. I called my mom, and I apologized to her and forgave her all at the same time. I apologized to her for pushing her away, because when my parents separated, I was really angry with my mom because it was my mom's fault that they separated. She wanted to leave because she wasn't happy in the marriage anymore. That was her reason for leaving. She wasn't happy. And so, and I was angry at her because I thought she was selfish. I thought she didn't care about me. She didn't care about fighting for it. You know, she was just being apathetic. And that's why I was angry towards her. But when I called her, I apologized for that, but I also forgave her because I held a lot of unforgiveness towards her. And so that was that was a beautiful conversation. After her, I called my dad, and then I told him I loved him sincerely for the first time, like sincerely, you know. And that was amazing because that was the start of a healing journey between me and my dad. And then after I called my dad, I called my brother. Now he didn't pick up, but I left a voicemail. And the reason why I called my brother was because I was angry toward him, because he did not want to process at all that divorce. He didn't want to talk with me about it. He didn't want to comfort me during that time. We literally did not have any type of interaction or contact at all during that separation. And so that was really hard for me because I remember when it initially happened, I was at a place where I really needed my big brother. You know, I needed his thoughts. I needed because this was happening to both of us, and he didn't allow me to connect with him in that moment. And so I was angry at him for that. And so I called him and apologized to him for that. And so anyway, all that to be said, there was just this massive moment of deliverance and healing. But it all started with me. It all started with Jesus changing me from the inside out, you know? And like a program couldn't do it. A book couldn't do it. Mentors couldn't do it. I mean, maybe that stuff helps, but I needed real change, you know, and he was faithful to give that to me. So that, and the rest is history, man. And what was funny is after that happened, you know, my parents, no one intended for me to become a Christian by going off to college. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't plan to become a Christian. Like my parents didn't see it coming. And so I remember after I got saved and I started talking about Jesus a lot on social media and with my family, I just wasn't fearful. I'm like, dude, this was real for me, and I'm going to let everyone know about it, you know? And so I was like this mini fresh evangelist kind of thing, you know? And so, but my mom, she literally thought I was brainwashed. She called me one day. So this is a cool story. I'm in my dorm one day. She calls me. And she says, "Hey, Keith, your grandma and I," mind you, my grandma's Catholic, okay? My grandma and I are worried about you. You're posting a lot about Jesus on Facebook. You're quoting all these Bible verses. She's like, we think these friends of yours are brainwashing you. And you know what's funny? You know what I told her? Because I really thought about what she said. And I said, "You know what, Mom? You're absolutely right. I am brainwashed, but in a really good way. Like Jesus washed my mind, you know, he made me pure. Again, I wasn't like zapped into holiness, but Jesus opened the eyes of my heart and I'm woken up to the reality of his kingdom, I'm woken up to the truth of Jesus, yeah, I am brainwashed, So if you think I am, that's because you're right.
What'd she say?
I think she was a little confounded when I said that, but she didn't really like argue about that point,
Okay, well, anyway.
Yeah. So it just made it awkward for her, I guess. But yeah, man. So yeah, that was just the beginning of my pilgrimage, you could say, with Jesus.
It's kind of all at once. That's it seems to kind of go one of two ways, right? It's kind of all at once or a real slow burn, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's some folks that kind of have like a middle of the road thing. Some folks kind of grew up in it or whatever, and there's not really like a moment. But for people that do, maybe they lived some life before they came to their faith. It seems to be one of those two.
Yeah.
But man, the stories like yours with where it's just kind of all at once. That's always.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say jealous, but I appreciate them outside looking in. I'm like, that's very cool.
Yeah, and just as a word of encouragement too, especially for our listeners, every testimony is powerful, no matter the intensity, no matter the background, no matter the stark contrast of what you came from to what you are now. Every testimony is powerful because it's the same God who transforms us. And yeah, I've heard many times people who grew up in the church and they hear testimonies like mine or like, this dude off the streets who's a drug addict is now saved, and that kind of contrast. I've heard people grow up in the church say like, I don't have a testimony as good as that, and I just think that's a lie. Every testimony is powerful.
It changed your life. Regardless. It changed. It saved your life.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a lot of fanfare.
Right. Exactly.
The end result is the same.
Yeah, man. Because for every believer, we all die. We're all buried with Christ, and then we're all going to be resurrected with Him. And that's the hope that we have as believers.
I'm curious, man. Just because, and that's the reason I was kind of touching on it. It kind of happened all at once with you. And you said, you said you went home. Was it that evening you called your mom?
Mm-hmm.
So like,
yeah, same evening.
How did you make that leap? Because like, I mean, just being completely candid, forgiveness is something that I still struggle with at times.
Yeah, man.
And in a lot of situations, I'm a lot better than I used to be. In a lot of situations, I can get there. It might look a little bit different than if there's a textbook, like, picture of forgiveness, it might look a little bit different for me, but I can get there.
Yeah.
But still, I do personally struggle with it in some situations still.
Yeah, for sure.
So how, like day one, like the first few hours, how do you get there?
Yeah, I think for me, because that experience was so radical, and in a lot of ways, I was driven just by the encounter of the goodness of God that I had. For me, it wasn't this moral or ethical decision that like, okay, like maybe I should do this because it's the right thing to do. But I think more than that, it was, man, I just encountered someone who is beyond anything I could imagine, I for the first time received a touch from the goodness and the love of God, and it was the Holy Spirit who really piloted me to do that, to want to do that. I think getting a little pastoral a little bit. As a pastor, I do counsel a lot of people. I talk with people, and people invite me into their lives. They invite me into their struggles, and unforgiveness does come up quite a bit. And what I've noticed is, and not that I've mastered anything by any means, but I think forgiveness comes a little easier when you realize, if Jesus could do that, if He could lay down His life and do that for us, like who are we to not? And even Paul writes about that. He's like, hey, forgive one another just as Christ has forgiven you. And so I think there's a lot to be said about why we forgive in the first place. because a lot of unforgiveness, and forgive me if I'm getting a little teachy.
No, not at all. No.
But a lot of unforgiveness comes from the mindset of self-preservation, that there we have to die to our selfishness, and not make things about us, but about the bigger need that needs to happen, which is restoration, reconciliation, healing, all of those things. I mean, when you think about why God sent his son Jesus in the first place, it was to reconcile us back to him. That was his whole goal. When you read 2 Corinthians 5 in verse 20, Paul talks about this whole idea of reconciliation. And he says, hey, we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God is making an appeal through us. Paul says, I implore you by the mercies of God, be reconciled to him. And then later he goes on to say that reconciliation, the word reconciliation belongs to us as believers, but also the ministry of reconciliation belongs to us. No one else has that but us. And so when you look at this word reconciled, I think, I'm convinced that is the one reality, the one word among other words that is really found at the core of the heart of God. Everything Jesus did from birth to the cross was to reconcile us back to him, to bring us back to him. And so but not just to him, but also with one another, And so there's this vertical reconciliation between God and man, but then there's a horizontal reconciliation between man and man. And I think it's funny that it forms the shape of a cross. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? That might sound a little cheesy, but yeah, man. I think when you fully capture the heart of reconciliation, forgiveness becomes a little easier, and you don't make it about what offended you. You don't make it about how they are, but more than, you're seeing the bigger picture of, okay, we need to fight for unity. We need to fight for restoration, because when we do, God's going to bless that and honor that, and we don't find ourselves in that ditch anymore, but we experience the freedom and the blessing that comes along with that,
So I'm kind of asking for me, but I'm also asking for other people, because I know I'm nowhere near, alone in kind of having these questions. But how do you get there to that point of reconciliation? Sometimes it's easy, or it's you can see that finish line, I guess, if you want to see it like that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, I mean, facts are facts, man. Some people just suck.
Yeah, dude.
Some people,
straight up,
if you let them exist in your life, they will poison it. So how do you get to a point of reconciliation and forgiveness with that person and still not, without sort of exposing yourself to what they will do if you allow them to be in your, does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. You don't want to, it's almost like you're trying to prevent being taken advantage of.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so to that, I would say this is where integrity comes into play. So as long as just you are doing the right thing, the godly thing, you're doing what Christ is doing. No, it doesn't matter what their reaction is. It doesn't matter what their response is, what their words are, what they do with that. What you are doing is creating honesty between you and the Lord. As long as we're living our lives to where our character is clean before him, everything else will fix itself. And again, that's not going to fully perfect the situation or heal the situation, but as long as we are practicing integrity and we are addressing the stuff within us first, and we give those things to the Lord, however they handle that, respond to it, that's between them and the Lord. That's not between you and that other person anymore. Like, and honestly, like how they respond to your forgiveness or your apologies or whatever it is, how they respond to that says more about them than it does about you.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so we're not responsible for how someone, I'll say it like this, we're not responsible for them, we are responsible to them. And so as long as I'm checking myself and the Holy Spirit is helping me to consecrate me and to heal my heart, and I'm making the right decisions and all of that. However they respond to that is between them and the Lord. So I think a great example is David, King David in the Old Testament. He was a man who had integrity before the Lord, but he still had haters.
Yeah,
bro. There were so many people out to get him, but he didn't change. He was still himself before the Lord. He was still the man after God's own heart. So, but yet, I mean, that didn't mean Saul just suddenly liked him. That didn't mean all these other people suddenly liked him. I mean, when you read the Psalms, David over and over, he's not fearful, but he's concerned. You know, he's telling God his honest thoughts. He's like, man, these people are after me.
Yeah, I've been hiding in a cave.
Yeah. And so David, it's so awesome. Have you ever read The Tale of Three Kings?
No.
Oh, you've got to read that book. Yeah. So Grace Church sells it. Okay. But A Tale of Three Kings by Gene Edwards, you got to write it. Our listeners got to write it or got to read it. So it's a really short book, and the chapters are super short. Yeah, come on. Yeah, come on. Yeah, and the chapters are short. They're like a page and a half long, and so you can just breeze right through it. But anyway, so that book, it's about three kings. It's about Saul, David, and Absalom, which is one of David's sons. And it's an allegory about their life from the Old Testament. And so it kind of primarily focuses on David, but it shows how David kept himself pure while receiving all of the accusation, while people were after his life, trying to kill him, chase him out, you know. And okay, real quick, I got to mention this because this is a beautiful part in the book. My favorite chapter, I've read the book like 10 times. It's crazy. And it'll make you cry. But my favorite chapter in that book is chapter 17, where, so real quick, you know how in movies or TV shows, you'll have an episode or like a brief moment where it's like a flashback or like a foreshadow? So the book does that. Chapter 17 is a foreshadow. It takes a break from the main story, and it has a foreshadow of one of David's mighty men. So the foreshadow is this. There's this little boy in Israel, and he receives word that one of David's mighty men is still alive. This is kind of in the future. He's still alive. He's the last one alive, but he's an old man at this point. And he's kind of like this old sage figure in the village who kind of like lives on the outskirts, you know? And so the boy makes it a point to go and visit this man because he hears all the tales about David and the mighty men, you know? And so he has all of these romantic thoughts about David's life, about what they did. And so he goes up to this old man's house and he knocks on his door, and he ends up bringing this boy into his home and telling him the tale, but it wasn't what he expected because the tale wasn't romantic. Because what this guy was saying, he was like, let me tell you about David. He was a man who cried all the time. He was a guy who was broken all the time, and it wasn't sexy. It wasn't this fairy tale, you know. It wasn't a happily ever after. I mean, God brought him there eventually, but David was a broken man. And so it's just a beautiful encounter between this young boy who's hearing the tales of David, you know, but yet one of his mighty men who actually lived this stuff with him in the cave, and just describing the integrity that he had and how he kept himself pure whenever he had enemies in his life, you know. And so one of the most profound encounters in David's life is when David was in the cave, and Saul was in the cave with him, but he didn't know David was there. And so the Bible says that he came up to him with a spear. He was going to take him out, but he decided not to. Instead he cut a slice of his garment off, and then later he showed it to Saul. He's like, "Hey man, look what I could have done to you," but he didn't do it. And the reason why he didn't do it is because the Bible says that he didn't want to harm the Lord's anointed. He was still anointed. David wasn't king yet. It wasn't his time yet. And so I think there's a lot to say about whenever we're talking about unforgiveness and how we treat people. Like they're a son and a daughter of God too, you know, and whether they're walking with Jesus or not, and to see them like that does take the Holy Spirit. You know, it takes the spiritual eyes. But you see, when we make it about ourselves, we start to have those fleshly emotions about that person. But when you zoom out of yourself and you see them the way God sees them, you start to realize like, okay, they're a hurting person. They got junk that they're dealing with. And by keeping myself good in check, that could possibly help them out to do the same. But again, how they do that is between them and the Lord,
So I guess my kind of question is going back to reconciliation, because again, and I don't mean to write anybody off, but some people are just poison.
Yeah. Toxic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just having them in your life, period, is a net negative.
Yep.
So like, how do you, I guess maybe it's kind of a two-part question. Maybe it's just a little more, a little too broad of a question, but I guess one, what does reconciliation look like with someone who you can't allow in your life?
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess really, can that even exist? Like, can you really say you're reconciled if you're like, okay, like, sure, I forgive you, I forgive you, but you're out of my life.
Yeah.
Like, is that real reconciliation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So forgiving someone doesn't mean you have to like them, right? It doesn't mean you have to be friendly with them. Because earlier I said, we're not responsible for how they feel or think, but we are responsible to them. And so, it definitely, like, there will or may be people in your life who are just crazy toxic, and mainly because they just, again, they have junk in their life that they need to deal with, and maybe I or you are not the person to address that in them. But I think the best thing we can do is just pray for them, man. Like, dude, prayer does so much because again, it gets us out of our emotions toward that person, and we start to gain the perspective of God, because God hasn't left them, God hasn't abandoned them. But that doesn't mean we let the boundaries down, because I think there's also something to be said about maintaining healthy boundaries. And so I think it's totally possible to forgive someone yet still have boundaries up, because they still have stuff that could still harm maybe your marriage or relationships you have, or your home, your job, whatever that is, And, but I think how we carry ourselves through that stuff matters,
Yeah.
that we don't get emotional about it. We don't, certainly not attack or accuse, but, because this is what I've learned too, man. People really watch people,
Yeah.
like, especially as Christians, people really watch us. They watch how we act, how we behave. They hear the words we say. It's like, the watching world watches, right? It's almost like, C.S. Lewis actually talks about this. He says that Christians are like products in a display window, and the world are the people walking by, and they're looking in, seeing if what they see they like, And Jesus says this too. He's like, hey, Jesus told his disciples, he's like, hey, the world will know that you guys are my disciples by how? By the way you love one another. Like, love is the currency of our relationship as Christians. And so when the world sees how we treat other people, that's going to either preach positively or negatively to them. And so, yeah, I don't think forgiveness necessarily means you have to get along or like them or even spend time with them. But because here's the thing, forgiveness is not for them. Forgiveness is for you, always. It's when we forgive, it heals us from the inside. And that's because the Bible says that when we confess to God, we receive forgiveness. But when we confess to one another, we receive healing, And man, that, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that play out of people reaching healing and unity because they decided to get over themselves, to get over the other person, and to reach that. But yeah, Jesus had people that didn't like him. Jesus, his ministry was not going around and getting along with everyone. I mean, he didn't get along with the Pharisees. The Pharisees didn't care to hear him out. he rebuked the Pharisees, man. Like I think it's either book of Matthew or book of John. There's the 7 woes. Like woe to you Pharisees because you do this, you do that. And yeah, even Jesus himself didn't get along with everyone.
That's a good point.
But I think what's cool, man, is in the book of Mark, there's a little nugget. I think it's in chapter 3, where it says that Jesus called to him those that he wanted, and right after that verse, it lists off the names of the 12 disciples by name, and those were the ones he wanted. I mean, Jesus had a lot of followers. But as far as his inner circle, the 12 disciples, like those were the ones he called to continue the ministry that he came to begin, And so, but yeah, but Jesus, again, he was a man of integrity. So coming back to the cross, again, he didn't get along with the Pharisees, but he still prayed for them while on the cross. And that's powerful, man. Like, no, Jesus and the Pharisees didn't get along. That wasn't the goal. But Jesus, he kept himself pure. He didn't become ugly or bitter just because he had enemies. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like he still prayed for them. And so I think Jesus is the best model when we look at trying to understand or even reach unforgiveness or forgiveness.
Yeah, I wasn't fishing for a specific answer, but I was actually thinking about this yesterday. I think.
Yeah.
Just kind of exactly what you're saying with Jesus, like. Just thinking about forgiveness in general and like, man, so obviously Jesus, he knew everything that was going to happen. He knew Judas was going to betray him.
Yeah.
And he allowed him to be there. Like he obviously forgave him and he allowed him to do it still.
Yep.
And I was just thinking about that. Like I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can forgive somebody for something that they've done to me, but I can't permit them to do it again.
Yeah, right.
I can't, I don't know how to get there.
You know what's wild, dude? So on that, because if you read the text closely, Jesus, he didn't just allow Judas to do that. He actually told Judas to do that.
Do what you got to do.
Yeah, he says, whatever you're going to do it. Like he excused him from the table.
Yeah.
And
he even told him to be quick about it, right?
That's right. Yeah, and be quick. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
Not that we should go around and tell people to harm us, but Jesus just knew something about the will of God that unless he did this, like the other things wouldn't have played out, But yes, and that's another crazy thought. Like Judas was a man who I think Judas probably had more natural aptitude than the rest of the disciples. He was a really smart guy. He was a numbers guy, he held the money bag for the crew, And so, he thought in numbers. He was a very logical thinker. But he spent 3 years with Jesus doing that ministry. And yet his devotion was superstitious. He had superstitious faith with Jesus. On the outside, he was spiritual. He seemed very godly and Christian, and but in the inside was the enemy, because the Bible says that Satan entered into him, which drove him to do that, which is pretty wild to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So
yeah, there's a lot.
Like I said, I wasn't trying to elicit a specific answer. It was a sincere question. I'm kind of constantly trying to understand everything better. But forgiveness is one of those things that just me personally, and like I said, I know I'm not alone at all. But it's just something that it's kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back for me personally. It's like I make some progress, good, and then I'm like, but what about this? Again, like the other day, like I couldn't do that. I can forgive you if you've done something wrong. I can get there. But if reconciliation means that I have to knowingly allow you to do it again, I can't get there.
Right.
Or I guess I shouldn't say I can't, but I haven't gotten there yet. I don't know how to get there,
Yeah. It's a journey for sure.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and, if you want, let's go ahead and take a break real quick, and then we'll
do it.
Come back to it.
Cool. Yeah.
One of the most common things I hear when I'm talking to people about coming on this show is, I'm just a nobody. I always tell them the same thing. There is no such thing in the kingdom. Now, I appreciate that sentiment greatly because we're all called to humility, right? The Bible hammers that point home over and over and over again. But we are not interested at all in only speaking to people from a specific background or who are well known just so we can get clicks and views. We want to talk to God's real family, the broken, the healed, the once lost and now found, the real representatives of his kingdom on earth. So, if you believe that you or someone you know may be a good fit as a guest on The Rugged Path, send your information to guest@theruggedpathpodcast.com. Now, full disclosure, we are a very small operation, so if you're not local to North Carolina or traveling here at some point, we may not be able to get you here right now. But, and I need you to hear me on this, don't let that stop you from sending in your information, because you and I both know that if the Lord wants your story shared on this platform, he will make a way when the time is right. But you got to get on our radar. All right? Think about it. Pray about it. And if you feel led to, reach out. We look forward to hearing from you. All right, brother, back from the break.
Yeah.
So we kind of went off on a kind of not really a tangent, but kind of got into some stuff about forgiveness and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of bring us back to just real quick, kind of your kind of moment of salvation.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot going on in there. I asked you about the forgiveness thing, but I'm also curious, just in general, I'm curious. You said, you heard God's voice telling you, this is you. What did that sound like?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it was like an audible voice, like how we're talking to each other right now.
Just like an understanding.
Yeah, it wasn't like this voice from the clouds, like, this is,
Monty Python.
I am God. And no, it definitely wasn't like that. It was more of, God talks to the heart. And it was more of like just an impression I was getting that while I was seeing this image, I could as I'm seeing it, I could almost interpret what it was that I was seeing, but the Lord was talking to the heart. And so I had a friend actually in college explain it like this, that it makes total sense. Like God, I think there's a reason why God speaks to our hearts more than he just speaks to our ears, because when you speak, if he can get your heart, we're more inclined to obey, right? God is after like your core, and so I that's probably the best way I can explain it. I don't know if I'm answering that well.
No, you are.
Yeah, it wasn't audible. It was more of, I could just sense very strongly that this is what the Lord was saying about this thing that he was showing me.
That makes sense. And it makes sense. It ties into, we're told to guard our heart above all things, right? Even just on a I guess more practical level, for me at least, like an example, like my wife, when we first kind of were brought together, we didn't know each other, but it was like I had known her my entire life.
Yeah.
And that comes from the heart. You know what I mean? It's like, so I think I understand what you're saying. It's just something you just kind of know it. Like,
you can't put words to it, man.
Right. Yeah.
It's futile. Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious, because everything else seems so vivid. Yeah, I just didn't know if there was like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you said, like a Monty Python thing. Like,
right.
What's up? I'm God.
Yeah. That movie's so funny.
Anyway, so I had a couple notes here. Just one more kind of question about that time frame, and then we can kind of move on. But it's a little bit touching back on the forgiveness thing, but not really. I'm just kind of curious about the dynamics of that conversation when you called your mom. Like, what was that conversation like? Was she receptive? Was she?
Yeah. She was confused at first because I've never called her to talk about something like that before.
Okay.
It was more of like, I'm sure in her eyes it was, oh, my son is calling me and he might need something because he's out at college, you know?
Yeah.
But it was also late at night too, because the service started at 7, ended around maybe 8:30, and I probably called her around 8:45, 9 o'clock,
Okay.
you know? And so I could tell that when I was speaking with her, because I had uh, a very sober tone with her on that call, and I could tell that she was picking that up. So she was in listening mode
Yeah.
more,
Okay. Gotcha.
you know. And so I think in her eyes she could tell that I had something to say and I just needed to say it, and so she was just listening. And then when I shared that stuff with her, I could tell for her it was a breakthrough moment, because not like she got saved or anything, and I'm still praying for my family because they don't really truly walk with Jesus even still to this day. But for her, I needed, it wasn't stuff that she necessarily needed to hear. I think it was great for her to hear it, but it was stuff I needed to say, you know, because I was the one that held the unforgiveness. I was the one that was bitter, and I needed to say it to her. Again, forgiveness is for us, you know, it's to heal us. Again, what they do with it, that's between them and the Lord, but it heals us. And so, yeah, and it wasn't a long conversation either. It was very brief, but I just, it's kind of a vague memory, but I remember just telling her, cause she knew I was upset with her. I made that very obvious during the divorce process. This was before college, because I would have sit downs with her and just let her know how upset I was about them separating. And yeah, I would plead with her even to fight for the marriage. Like, don't do this, you know, talk to dad, work it out, do what you got to do, you know, to be happy again. But she already made her decision. She was she was settled in it. She wasn't going to budge. And so that was the context coming into this conversation when I called her. And so again, it was a lot of breakthrough for her, because I think she as a mom just hated, like it destroyed her inside, that one of her own sons just did not support her in her decision to leave my dad. And not that I did support it, but my feelings towards her totally changed, you know? Yeah. So it was such a good conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just told her, I was like, Mom, I need to tell you this. This is what happened tonight with me. And I just want to let you know that I apologize. I forgive you. And I think I remember telling her this, that, yeah, I know you and dad aren't going to come back together, you know, and it was already like 2 years after the divorce anyway. So the idea of them coming back together was a little odd even. But it was more of just me letting her know, like, hey, I have things that I need to say and you just need to listen. So she actually didn't say much at all in that phone call. She really appreciated it. We kind of cried it out a little bit.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah.
Oh, that's good.
I think it was the phone call with my dad that was a little more emotional.
Okay.
Still a short call, but telling him I loved him. You know, I think as a father, hearing that from your son just meant a lot to him.
Yeah, I bet.
You know, yeah.
I bet, especially, and I'm probably, you know, or maybe I'm reading into it way more than, you know, doing the armchair psychoanalysis thing, but him being a body shop guy, like he's a fixer. I imagine all these things you were talking about, all these changes he was making, he's trying to fix the brokenness, and
like you wouldn't believe. Yeah.
I imagine you telling him that you love him. He's probably like,
yeah,
it probably carried a lot of weight. He's probably like, oh,
yeah,
you know.
And I'll say this too, you know, as especially if you're a dad and you're a non-believer, you don't really know. Well, maybe you do, but all right. So my dad wasn't fathered well either. You know, my dad, because earlier I said his dad was a race car driver. Well, he was also a pretty terrible person. He was. And in fact, little bunny trail, I'll come back to my dad. So my dad's dad, I actually never met him in person because he was in prison all of my life. Get this. The first time I saw him in the flesh was at his funeral, because he died in prison. He died in prison when I was in middle school. and that wrecked my dad. And we were at his funeral, and it was an open casket, like a showing. And seeing him laying in that casket was the very first time I saw him in person.
Wow.
And that was so surreal for me, because growing up, I personally knew two grandmas, but only one grandpa. That was my mom's dad. And he passed away like back in 2020 or 2021. But as far as my dad's dad, I never met him. And it was always kind of weird thinking about him, because he would, even in prison, he would, so growing up, I would receive things in the mail from him, because he would make, because in prison, you can like do crafts and make things. And so I would literally get packages in the mail, and they would be like beautifully crafted leather wallets, and it would have my name on it. He made me a leather belt once. He sent me a card that he personally colored on it. Like, it had a car, and he was an artist. I mean, the guy made really, really quality stuff, but I never knew him. I couldn't put a face to these gifts that I was giving or getting. And my brother too, he would make it for my brother. And, funny story. So because he was in prison and he didn't really know us, so my brother's name is Ryan. Okay. When he got his leather wallet in the mail, it said Brian with a B. We're all laughing about it because he didn't know him. And so anyway, but all that to say, like, my dad was not fathered well. He went to prison because he was abusive towards my grandpa, my dad's mom. And there was a lot of infidelity going on. There was abuse, physical abuse going on. And so he actually was, I think he had life in prison. It was pretty serious. Yeah, but he died in prison. And so, again, seeing him for the first time in his casket. But yeah, my dad he didn't have a great father example. So how can he be a great example to me, And so coming back to that phone call, I think in a lot of ways, my dad, he did not know how to come to his son and initiate the love, but rather it was me coming to him. Now that I'm full of the love of Christ, I'm coming to him and telling him that I love him not for the first time, but sincerely,
Yeah.
And I could tell, like, it was what he needed, It was almost like I was giving him what he was supposed to give to me, and it healed both of us. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. Yeah. Was that you mentioned that there was suicide attempt and stuff in there?
Yes.
Was that before?
That was, so that was before. So I'll get into that. So so right after my parents separated, and earlier I mentioned my dad going through those emotional phases. So what his tipping point was, a suicide attempt that he did, where he I was a junior still in high school. And so he came up to me one random night. Again, it was just me and him in the house. He came up to me one night, and he says, "Hey son, I have an interview in downtown Dallas." And because, again, like earlier I said, he was like making all these changes. And so he had this interview apparently, and he came up to me and he said, "Hey, you have school tomorrow, so make yourself dinner, go to bed, and I'll see you. I'll more than likely see you tomorrow," because he wasn't going to come home till really late. I was like, "Okay, cool. Like, good luck on the interview, Dad." And so I did all that, went to bed, and then I want to say, like, I think it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, my dad like barges in my room, just swings the door open, and it wakes me up. I kind of jolt up in my bed. And, I'm like half awake, and I can see my dad in the entryway of my door, and I can kind of like, it's dark too, so I can kind of see a silhouette. And he's actually half naked, because anyway, so he came up to I'm really confused and tired, but he came up to my bed, and he's in his underwear, and he sits on the edge of my bed, and I could smell the alcohol. Like, it was so bad. I could smell it. And I sit up in my bed a little bit, and he just starts spilling his guts, man. He just starts crying and crying. He could barely get words out. And I'm like rubbing my eyes, and I'm like, "Dad, what's going on? Are you okay? What happened?" and all the only words I can make out was he kept saying that he was sorry. Like, I'm sorry. And I was like, what are you sorry about? And he says, I've been a terrible husband to your mom. I've been a terrible father to you. I mean, he's at his end, and he's just spilling his guts, but he was also drunk. So, there's that. And so, and I'm like, Dad, like, where are your clothes? And he's like, I'm getting ready for bed, but I just wanted to come in here. And I was like, okay. And he said, I wrecked the Mustang. And I mentioned that Mustang.
Yeah.
He says, I wrecked the Mustang. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he, again, he's drunk, and he's trying to get me out of bed to go into the garage to go see the car. And I'm like, Dad, I'm tired. I got school tomorrow. We'll talk about this tomorrow, And he says, no, you need to see this now. And I'm like, Dad, please, like, you're obviously drunk. I can smell it. Just go. You need to go to bed. Just go to bed. And so, he says, no, you don't understand. I lied to you. And I was like, what are you lying about? And he said, there was no job interview. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, I didn't leave the house to go to an interview. I left the house to go drive the Mustang off of a bridge.
Oh.
Yeah. And when he said that, I just sat there and I didn't know what to say. What can you say? And I told Dad, I was like, hey, we'll talk about this tomorrow. We'll talk about it tomorrow, because this is not the right time. You're, whatever words I have for you, you're drunk, like, let's get in a better situation, And so, I do remember that I was so furious in that moment, because I just had this thought crossed my mind of, I was like, okay, my mom left, my brother left to go to college, and now my dad wants to leave. And I just remember feeling so alone in that moment, and all I could feel was just rage. And I remember shoving my dad off my bed, and I felt a little bad because he was drunk. But I was like, Dad, and I was like, I'm raising my voice at this point. I'm like, Dad, you need to go to bed right now, and we'll talk about this later. And dude, I don't know how I managed to do this, but I managed to fall back asleep that night. And so my alarm woke me up, and getting ready for school was weird. It was surreal. I felt like, what am I doing right now? Is going to school the best move right now? Like, what? I just felt out of reality, And so I did go to school. Now, I was dating a girl at the time. And when I drove to school, I found her car in the parking lot, and I'm like, okay, I need to tell someone about this, because I can't take this. And so I pulled up to her car. I got out of my car, sat in her car, and I just started crying in front of her. And she's like, what's going on? So I told her everything that happened that night. And I begged her. I said, don't tell the counselor. I'm like, don't tell the school counselor. And I just didn't want word to go around, And anyway, later that day, I'm sitting in one of my classes, and this student walks in the classroom, hands me a note, this little pink piece of paper, and it said, go to the counselor's office. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. And so I go to the counselor's office. I walk in. My ex-girlfriend, was sitting in one chair. Counselor was in another chair. And so I sat down, and I clearly know what this is about, And so the counselor was saying, this counselor, she was a very sweet lady, and I always got along with her. So I wasn't too upset, because I was glad it was her and not a different one. And so she was saying, hey, Keith, like, Amanda here, the girl I was dating at the time, she told me what happened. How about you just take the day off? Just go home, do what you need to do. Don't worry about your assignments and your classes. I'll talk to your teachers. Just go home. I was like, okay. And so when I left the school, I was like, okay, well, I have time. So what I decided to do now, when my dad was in my room, he told me it wasn't a bridge he was trying to drive off of. It was actually a highway overpass. So in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, you have I-20, and then you have a highway called 360. and they intersect. And when you go down 360 south, if I'm getting my direction right, if you go down 360 south and you're trying to go I-20 east, there's this ginormous overpass you have to drive. Yeah, I mean, and it's pretty high up there. And that's where he was trying to drive off. And knowing my dad and how well he knows cars, first of all, he took the Mustang for a reason, because it's a metal car. I mean, it's all steel and aluminum. And so he was going to take the weight of that car to drive through the barriers off that overpass. And so also so when I left for school, I did see the Mustang in the garage, and dude, the whole right side, like the passenger side, was just all ate up. I mean, it looked like a dinosaur just like scraped the whole side of it. It was bad. And so I was like, okay, when I left school, I had this thought. I was like, okay, I'm going to go visit that spot. I'm going to drive to that overpass, and I'm going to see if I can see red streaks along the concrete barrier. And so I drove there, and what was wild, dude, is when I didn't know Jesus yet, but the Lord revealed this to me later in time. But when I got to the overpass, because I got there before rush hour, so there wasn't a lot of cars on the highway, and so I decided to drive a little slow so I could see the scene. What I saw, this was crazy. The concrete, so it was concrete barriers, but also like metal railings, you know. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, there's going to be dents, there's going to be shrapnel and pieces all over the concrete, you know. And when I drive there, all I saw was I saw the red streaks from the paint. The car's red, and I saw the paint streaks. But dude, the concrete and the metal was totally unscathed.
Wow.
Totally unscathed. Like no chips, no dents, nothing like that. I mean, it was like someone took a red paintbrush and just brushed the concrete. I mean, and the car is messed up. And now I didn't know this in the moment, but later in time, the Lord helped me to realize that He saved my dad.
Yeah, I'd say
like
so.
You know what I mean? Like he prevented those walls from, because again, I know my dad, like he would have gotten that car off of that thing. But the Lord totally saved him. And yeah, man. And so now my dad later restored the car, and it looks beautiful now. But but that's when I learned that, dude, the Lord really saved my dad.
Does he recognize that?
I shared those thoughts with him. Yeah. And it wasn't like this huge profound thing for him, but we haven't really talked about it a lot since that happened, because I would imagine it's kind of a shameful topic, sure. You know?
Yeah.
We've reached a lot of healing together, you know, and we've grown a lot together, because when my mom left, that forced my dad and I to live together and really grow together and lean on each other. And so the father and son relationship was growing a lot. But we haven't talked about that specific incident since it happened, just because it's my dad's just not proud of it, you know. And pastorally, I know this too, that when it comes to suicide attempts, or rather failed suicide attempts, there's a lot of shame behind that. There's a lot of embarrassment behind that. And so just to not shame him, you know, and resurface those emotions, you know, we don't really talk about it a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sense.
But it's almost like it's in the back of our minds, and we just like know,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know. But but as far as like a direct conversation, we haven't really had that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious. That's a pretty big intercession, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so that was before college.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then tying that all back together, that makes sense. That, again, this is just my armchair analysis, but like I said, it seems like probably he was trying to fix things. He was trying to change all these things that maybe he felt were not sitting right before, just surface level things, but just trying to fix things. Mm-hmm. Couldn't fix it. Tried to drive off a bridge.
Yeah, he was giving up.
Yeah, exactly. And then down the road just a little bit, you get saved. You call him, telling him you love him. Man, I bet I bet that.
Yeah.
I mean, you already said that you think it hit pretty hard, but I bet it's even more than you probably realize.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that wasn't to say that our relationship was absolutely perfect from then on out, because we still had our struggles and things we had to get over. But that, man, I know this about God, that he specializes in turning tragedy into triumph, and what the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good. And so, I mean, the Lord totally used it. I mean, he saved my dad, but from that, because he was still alive, we were able to heal together. But dude, only Jesus could have done that.
Yeah, man. That is one of the coolest things. I feel like I say that a lot. That's one of the coolest things, because there are just so many cool things when you really kind of start digging into. You go and both feet all in with your faith. There's just so many cool things, but one of the really cool ones is that how he will turn all bad things for good.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can't see it in the moment, but if you look for it, it's there.
It's there.
He's going to use it. Yeah. And it really it speaks to a question that I hear a lot of people have. I'm sure you hear it all the time. Like, well, God's so great. Why would he let this happen? And X, Y, and Z. And it's like, just shift your perspective a little bit. And sometimes things have to happen, but if you look for it, he's going to use it for good. Yep. He's still, there's still love in there. Yeah. It's not like he's leaving you out to dry. There's still love in there. He's saving you from it in some way. You just have to see it.
Yeah. Nothing's too big for him.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is too insignificant to him either.
Right.
And man, that's an age-old question, isn't it? Like, if God is so good, if God is so loving, why does he allow this, or why does this happen? And it's an interesting question, and not to, like, we don't have to get too much into that question, but I think what we need to be reminded of is when you look at Genesis 2 or even 3 in the garden, like, we allowed that to happen. Like, we're the ones that ate the fruit.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, we're the ones that disobeyed. And so to put the blame on God is totally unfair. And so, but yeah, I mean, God is, he is consistent. He's always good. He's always loving, and no matter what the condition of the world or the condition of our hearts, like, he is always faithful and there for us to anchor onto, and latch onto. But yeah.
Yeah, touching on heart conditions again, and Ryan was talking about that last night, the kind of different heart conditions that Jesus lays out.
The soils.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So is it the hard heart, the shallow heart, the cluttered heart, then the humble heart?
Yeah, it's funny he called him that because I've taught on the parable of the four soils at young adults plenty of times, but I've always kind of called it different stuff. I mean, you can put words to whatever, but Ryan's absolutely right. The soil represents the condition of our heart, and the parable is brilliant because the seed is obviously the word, and so when the seed falls on the soil, or when we hear the word and the word falls on us, depending on the condition of our hearts is how that word is going to grow or not. And it's not the seed's fault. It's the soil.
Right.
It's us,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of, I saw a thing earlier today, I think, just some random little short video or whatever.
Yeah.
Where someone was, and this lady, feel bad, or young girl, whatever, I feel bad for her. She was like almost foaming at them, just angry, but like confronting someone who, I wouldn't call him a street preacher. I think it may have been on a college campus or whatever, as a young guy or whatever.
Yeah.
But she was just like, you just said, words came out of your mouth that, even if I'm paraphrasing, but even if after salvation, you're still going to have hard times. She's like, so what is even the point? I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, it's the hard times, it's the hard things that cause us to grow.
Mm-hmm.
The best scripture to read on about this is 1 Peter chapter 4, because the whole chapter is about suffering and how believers ought to handle suffering. And it also lays out the purpose of suffering, because suffering Suffering is not this thing we go through because God is cruel and he just wants us to go through it for whatever reason. It's suffering is a means for God to come in and be the victor of that situation, because Jesus suffered and he had to suffer. And Paul writes in Philippians that we can have fellowship in his sufferings. So suffering is not, to the Christian at least, is not this negative thing that happens to us. Suffering is an opportunity, is an area where we can have fellowship with God. Because when we suffer, if we make it about us, then we go through suffering not well. We come out the other end not like Jesus. But if we make it about Christ and we realize, okay, Jesus, you suffered. If I'm hated, it's because you were hated first. That's what he said. And also think of it like this too, man. As a believer, you're bought with a price. You are not your own, which means that if we suffer, it's not that the suffering is ours, it's his. It's actually his.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And now we might be the ones who feel it, but we're not. It doesn't we're not the ultimate recipient of it, if that makes sense. It's his to begin with,
right?
And by his goodness and his Holy Spirit, he's going to help us to get through the other side. And if we remain devoted and faithful through that, when we do end up on the other side, we'll look much more like Jesus. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, so suffering is not this thing we need to rush through. It's again, we can have fellowship with Jesus in that suffering because he suffered too. And it's an area that we can relate to Jesus with. And I love this about Jesus, because when you look at the other worldviews, when you look at the other so-called gods, none of them suffered. There was no cross.
Yep.
They didn't. It was always, hey, man has to do everything to get to me, but Jesus was the opposite. Like, hey, I did everything to get to you. And so come.
Yeah.
Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that question kind of speaks to, well, it very much speaks to what we're saying, like the heart posture, the soil. Like that is a transactional view of your faith. Like, what am I getting out of it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I'm not getting the thing that I want, why would I even do it?
Yep.
It's I would call that the shallow soil.
Yes.
the rocky soil.
Exactly. Yes. And that's why the scripture says, I think it's in James where he says, consider it joy when you go through many trials and tribulations. Why? Because it's the testing of your faith. Like it is meant to refine you. Are you familiar with blacksmithing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
somewhat. I'm not a blacksmith, but yeah.
Okay.
Somewhat.
So when you, I had a blacksmith explain this to me, and when he did, it blew my mind. When you refine a metal like gold or silver, for example, in order to refine and purify that metal, you have to put it through a furnace. You have to. Like that's how you eliminate the impurities and to make it a higher quality metal. And you don't just do that once. You have to do it several times. You have to put it in the furnace several times until the impurities are gone. And so I remember asking this blacksmith, I asked him a question. I said, hey, how do you know when you're finished? How do you know when the imperfections are gone? This is what he said, dude. He says, I know I'm finished when I can see the reflection of my face on the metal. Bro, that preaches.
Yeah.
And so what Jesus, and again, he doesn't do it because he's cruel. He's a really good blacksmith. What he does is that he takes us, puts us through furnaces, right? This 2022, you probably went through this thing. 2024, you probably went through this hard thing. Like we're constantly going in the furnace until Jesus can see his face on us, until he can see himself in our character, in our behavior. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the fellowship with the sufferings and talking about coming out of the other end looking like Christ. That's it, man.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's a good parallel, man.
Yeah. So imagine this with me, dude. Heaven is going to be full of people that are going to reflect the face of Jesus.
Wow. Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
That's something.
It's nuts. It's a lot to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's, that when you look at it that way, there's a purpose to suffering. We welcome the suffering. We don't create it. Oswald Chambers actually says something really good about that. He says as Christians, we're not out to suffer. Like we're not so spiritually zealous that we're trying to make sure that we suffer for Jesus. That would actually be kind of weird. He says, what he says is we're not after the suffering. What we're after is God's will, whether it brings suffering or not. Right. So it's not the thing we're chasing. We're not trying to make sure we're out there suffering for Jesus, but rather we're after his will, no matter if we're going to suffer through it or not. You know, and when you study the lives of martyrs, bro, that's what they did. Like they were just after Jesus, and some of them died doing it. Some of them got hurt real bad, but it doesn't matter because eternity was in their perspective. You know.
Yeah, that reminds me of something has become kind of I don't want to say a mantra because that sounds pretty granola, but but it's kind of like a life sort of saying it's become mine. It's just come what may, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that, exactly like you said, just if you're calling, I'm going to answer come what may. Mm-hmm. It will be done. If it's up to me, it will be done. You know what I mean? I like that, man.
Good stuff.
All right. So let's fast forward again a little bit. So we're back to college. You just got saved. Mm-hmm. Whole new world.
Yeah.
But also working through the old world and it's kind of how it always goes, right?
Killing
kinda,
the flesh, man.
Yeah. Letting things fall away and die and things like that. So I'm assuming you're there for 4 years. You went for a bachelor's, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And what's your bachelor's in, by the way?
Yeah. So I majored in criminal justice.
Okay.
And I minored in military science.
Oh, wow.
And that's what ROTC was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the ROTC counted as a minor.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. You can't major in it, but you can minor in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're there and you just kind of, you mentioned earlier, it just kind of clicked with you. You're like, I can do this Army thing. Like, I really like this. So
yep.
I guess kind of we pick up from there. What's it kind of look like? Was there anything kind of in your college other than obviously the biggest thing being saved and things like that?
So my military journey?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there is some overlap because before I met the Lord, I was all about the military. Mm-hmm. I knew early on, what I wanted to do with my life. And that was to be a commissioned officer and do my 20-year career and have that experience. I really wanted that. And when I got saved, I was in this pickle because that being in the military was always my self-ambition. That was something that I wanted to do. That was Keith Golightly's will for Keith, you know. But I'm a Christian now, so my big question, dude, and I wrestled with this for a whole year, my whole sophomore year of college. So let me step back a little bit. Because I got saved at the beginning of my freshman year of college. That whole year was just me and Jesus, man. Like I was just growing up in the Lord. I was an infant in Christ. I'm reading the Bible. I'm hungry. It was almost like a speed track, like Christianity 101. You know, I'm just learning all this stuff about Jesus. And it was such an amazing, rich time in my life, you know. Everything was so new. Well, when I reached sophomore year, that's when I started asking questions. Questions like, oh, snap, what's God's will for my life? You know, because the military was something I wanted. And so I was praying. I was like, Lord, what do you want? You know, do you have something else for me? And that was a scary thought. That was a scary prayer because I was on scholarship. And if I backed out, I had to owe money to the government. And I had a friend who was a part of the same ministry. He was in that boat. He was pursuing ROTC. He got saved and God called him out from pursuing the military, and he was owing the government money back. And I was like, oh man, I don't know if I want to do that. And so, dude, I was praying like crazy, and I had my friends pray with me. And literally the entire sophomore year, I was just confused about that because I just didn't know what the Lord wanted. And then towards the end of that year, I received peace about the military, and I just heard the Holy Spirit say, that God wanted me in the military still, but there was a big condition that it wasn't going to be my career field, it was going to be my mission field. And that shifted the paradigm for me, because it went from, it went to motive. So God helped me to see that it wasn't about the occupation, it was about my why in the occupation. My original why was about me and what I wanted out of it. But God, in his sovereignty and in his brilliance, even before I even knew him, God gave me this interest, this love for the military, so that when I did give my life to him, my career in the military would actually be for his kingdom, not for my kingdom. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
So like God was setting this up before I even encountered him. And so I just didn't learn that until later. And so when I received peace about that, I was like, okay, like, Lord, I'm gonna continue in the military, but it's not gonna be for me anymore. It's gonna be so that people in the DoD could know the name of Jesus, could know the gospel. God, the way I saw it was that I was going out as a missionary in the DoD. That's literally how I saw myself, and God had to help me understand my ultimate identity, because what the Holy Spirit helped me to realize is that I was not a soldier who just happened to be a Christian. I was a Christian who just happened to be a soldier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So like the uniform wasn't my identity. I at one point wanted it to be my identity, but I'm a child of God now. And so the uniform was just a season of my life that God wanted me to enter into so that I could make disciples in the DoD. Like that was God's calling for me. And man, there was so much peace in that. And it made my time pursuing the Army, the rest of my time in ROTC so much easier. And there was so much more clarity behind why I was in the Army in the first place, And so when I graduated, that was also the day I commissioned. So I pinned on rank. And the rest is history. So my major was criminal justice. My original plan was to be a military police officer. So I was going to be a commissioned officer. I wanted my MOS to be military police. That's kind of the reason why I did criminal justice. But I decided to go reserve because at that time I wanted to get my master's, and being in active duty, it would have been really hard for me to do that. So I decided to go reserves, but there was no military police units that had availability in the reserves. And so that's when but military intelligence did have availability. And so I was talking to one of my mentors in ROTC about it, and he was telling me about like, hey, you can have your clearance, you could have these opportunities, you can be in these units potentially. I was like, okay, that's interesting. And so I decided to pursue Intel. And again, my mindset was, okay, Lord, this is your calling for me. This is not about me. This is not about my career progression. This is not about what I want out of the Army, what duty station I want, what MOS I want, whatever doors you're opening, Lord, that's what I'm going to step into. And Intel was one of those things. And so I decided to get into that, got my clearance. And then I went off to MI Bullock, which was Fort Huachuca, Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was there for 4 months doing training. And then coming after that, came back to Texas, went to my unit, which was in Fort Worth. I was drilling at an MI unit in Fort Worth. And I was with that unit for about maybe 3 or 4 years. But during that time, I had multiple full-time civilian jobs because, again, I was in the reserves. So Army was just part-time for me. And then my trajectory shifted a lot whenever I got this deployment opportunity. It was my very first deployment. So the very first unit I was a part of, one of the commanders I had was really, really good about sending the soldiers in our unit deployment opportunities when they came up. And so the Army, I don't think they have this anymore, but they had a program called the Quick Start program. And the Quick Start program is when young lieutenants can jump on volunteer deployment opportunities to go help support forward units. And so I received an email from my commander about a deployment opportunity that had a lot of like special operations themes to it. I didn't really know for sure because no orders were made yet, but based on what I was reading on this email, there were words like task force, and it could be Afghanistan, it could be Iraq, I don't know, but it was counter ISIS missions. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Now here's the crazy part, and this is how I knew it was from the Lord. Usually I would just like brush off those emails because at this point in my life, I was newly married. Taryn and I just got married. I'm literally launching my career in the Army. I'm a young lieutenant. I had this other civilian job that I was working, and the last thing that a young man needed to do was to go off for a deployment for 9 months. Yep. You know, like even my uncle Chris, who was in the Navy. He was in the Navy for I think 20 years. I've always kind of looked at him as a mentor figure. And even he was telling me, he's like, Keith, you don't need to deploy, man. Like, why would you do that to your marriage, you know? And I totally get what he was saying, and I considered it. But I remember there was a day, I think I shared the story in a message once at Grace, but dude, this deployment opportunity just didn't leave my thoughts. Like I kept thinking about it, you know, it just kept coming to me. And that's how you know sometimes the Lord is talking to you, you know, like the repetitions, it won't leave your mind. And so I remember I was driving to this job. I was an insurance agent at one point, so I'm like making my way to my job. And I'm thinking about this deployment opportunity. And I'm thinking about it so much. I had worship music playing in my truck. And dude, like, I don't know what happened, but the Spirit of God just met me in my truck, dude. And I just started crying about this thing. And to the point where I couldn't even drive anymore. Like it just wasn't safe. I had to pull over because I'm all teary-eyed, you know? And I knew the Lord was talking to me about this deployment. And so I just remember, man, there was just something in my heart that bowed in that moment. And I was like, okay, Lord, if you want me to go on this thing for whatever reason, I don't know what your plan is. I don't know what you're doing here. But if this is something I need to jump on, I'll do it. And I'll talk to Taryn about it, you know? And so I pretty much made the commitment right then and there in my truck. And so later that day, I drove home and I approached Taryn. I said, hey, babe, because she knew about this opportunity, but we never really talked about it. And I said, hey, I just want to let you know, I think I'm supposed to go on this. I think I'm supposed to do it. And what was wild, dude, is that Taryn looked at me and she's like, it's so funny you say that because God was talking to me about it. And I'm thinking you should go on it too. And I'm like, okay. And so we took that as confirmation. And so I just did like a leap of faith, man. I went to that email. There was some paperwork attached to it. And so I filled out that paperwork to volunteer for it. I sent it to my commander and I said, hey, sir, I'm interested. Let me know if I can jump on this. And I think like it was 8 or 9 months later, a lot of time went by and I didn't hear anything back. I thought it fell through the cracks. At this point, I have a different civilian job and I kind of forgot about it, but God didn't. And I started receiving emails about me potentially deploying. I didn't receive orders yet, but there were some emails coming through and I was like, okay, this is interesting. And so anyway, I email after email and conversation, you know, and phone calls. And then Lord and behold, I got orders, dude. And they're like, okay, you're going to go to Iraq for 9 months and you're going to be in support of task force. This is what you're doing, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, okay. And so did all my pre-deployment stuff. I was attached to a very small group of lieutenants and captains that went out. We did pre-deployment together. I went to Arizona, Fort Hood, Fort Bragg. And we're doing all this stuff. And when we go to Fort Bragg, that's when we get briefed on our mission, like what we're actually there to do. And I remember we were driving to this compound, and I've never been to this compound before. And they're like, "Yeah, this is that one unit." And I'm like, "Okay, like this is interesting, you know." And so we jump on a VTC call with one of the sergeant majors of this unit. He's out forward and he's telling us what the mission is. He's like, "Yep, counter ISIS. We're pushing through Raqqa right now. This is what you can expect when you land. These are the teams that you might be working with. These are the people, the squadrons you might be working with. And we're like, okay, cool. Like we got to get ready, And so we jump on a C-17, get over there. And for the next 9 months, I was, they call it an augmentee, but I was an augment. I wasn't permanent party. Like I didn't work for the enterprise yet, but I was an augmentee in support of the mission there. And so I ended up being the reports officer for the entire task force. So anytime interrogation reports, exploitation reports came out, I would take all of that, QC them, and then I would blast them out to the greater task force, foreign partners, 3-letter agencies, even the White House. All of my reports went out to everyone. And what that was doing was feeding the intel network so that we could drive operations. So there's this cycle that SOF talks about, that intel drives operations drive intel. Mm-hmm. And it's just this constant cycle. And it was exciting, man. I mean, I was there during 2017, and that was when we were pushing through Syria. And so by the time I got there, we were pushing through Raqqa, and I think Manbij, if I'm getting my memory correct, Manbij was next. Anyway, so I was in a very small camp on the eastern side of Iraq and like the Kurdistan area. I was very close to the Iran border. And so I was working very close with special operators. They were going out every night. Like it became this thing where they did their job at night, we did our job during the day. Yeah. You know? And so we did all of the interrogations and reporting and exploitation, all of that, which again would drive operations. And it was very exciting. I met a lot of great people. I got my foot in the door with some of those permanent party members of the enterprise. And towards the tail end of my deployment, one of my OICs came up to me, and he says, "Hey Keith, have you ever thought about working for this unit?" And I was like, maybe. I mean, I'm just here to support. I never really thought about working full time. And he's like, he kept like giving me kind of winks and hints. He was like, "I think you should apply." He says, "I'll tell you what. I'll reach out to the recruiters back home. They'll send you an application." I was like, "Okay." And so I guess they liked the work that I did. And so I got the application like a week later. I filled it out in theater, and then when I got back home from that deployment, I started to get emails about this unit wanting to fly me out to Fort Bragg for assessment and selection for ANS. And so I did. I went out there. ANS was a week long. It was me and like 11 other guys that were getting assessed. Only 3 were hired, and I was one of the 3. And so they hired 3 officers. I ended up working for a squadron that was a sister squadron to the one that Keith is in, the other Keith, Okay, yeah. And so I was with that unit for about 4.5 years. And that's what got us here to North Carolina. So after I was selected, I received orders to PCS to Fort Bragg. We left that, and that was the first time we ever had an address outside of Texas. Wow. Yeah. And so we were renting a house in Pinehurst. And then while I was working for them, I was, on top of that, I was a member at Grace Church. And what's funny is, so when we moved here from Texas, I moved here a month before my wife did, because she had some stuff she needed to finish out in Texas. She wasn't ready yet to get out there. And so, but I had orders, so I needed to report and everything. And so we had a plan. Our plan was that I was going to go out there a month early, and then I was also going to search for churches for us, because we didn't know what was out here. And so I remember going to Manna Church in Fayetteville. I went to this one church called Veritas. I don't think they're around anymore, but they were like a brand new church. I tried them out. I went to a different church in Hope Mills. And it was always hard going to those churches because I was out in Pinehurst, and it was like an hour-long commute, sometimes longer, just to get to these churches. And I'm like, there's no way I can be consistent with those churches, and serve to the degree that I wanted to serve. And And then my mother-in-law called me, Taryn's mom, because she was helping me search. And at this point, she was living in Texas whenever we were there. And so Taryn's mom called me and she says, hey, I found a church that's like 12 minutes from your house. It's called Grace Church. Have you ever heard of it? And I was like, no. She's like, I think you should check them out. And because she was on their website, she's like, they look legit. They look spirit-filled, which was that was our biggest thing, that we wanted to be a part of a spirit-filled church. That was our thing. And so we're like, okay. And so that Sunday I drove to Grace, walked in the building, and Ryan was preaching that morning. They were going through a sermon series called Secret Lion Killers. And that was such a great service. And I remember when that service was done and I walked out of the building, the Holy Spirit spoke to me in that moment. And he says, this is it. This is the church that you and Taryn are going to serve at. This is where your community is going to be. This is where you're going to give your life. And I was like, okay, wow, like this is it. And so I called Taryn on the way back home and I said, hey, babe, I found our church. When you get here, we'll go through Connect Step, which looked a lot different back then. Do you remember AJ? Did you ever meet AJ Katucci?
I didn't. No.
Yeah, so he's Ryan's brother-in-law.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're both son-in-laws to Randy, but AJ was on staff as the executive pastor at the time, and he taught Connect Step. We met and became friends instantly. We got along really well. And AJ was actually the one who had the conversation with me whenever I was transitioning out of the Army and working at Grace Church, which that's like a whole separate story.
Okay.
And we can get into that a little bit if you want. Yeah, man, my time with that unit and serving at Grace was pretty great. It was exciting. And then in that time, I deployed again to Jordan, and that was during COVID, which was weird. Deploying during COVID was such an interesting time.
I bet.
Yeah, in fact, because COVID happened in March of 2020. That's kind of like when everything sparked, And my orders to go to Jordan was March. I was supposed to leave in March. Well, when COVID happened, everything was up in the air, and I remember I got a call from one of my leaders. And he says, hey, Keith, we know you're supposed to leave in 2 weeks. We've canceled your orders. Just hang tight because we don't know. No one knows what to do right now. And I was like, okay. And that's when we started to get orders to stay at home. No, Fort Bragg was a ghost town, dude. And no one knew what was going on. And I was at home for 6 weeks straight. I mean, everyone was home for 6 weeks straight. And it was just interesting. And then they were doing their best to get me out the door because we deploy in cycles. And when I deployed, I was supposed to replace someone. Well, because I wasn't out there yet, that someone was still there. And he was getting upset because he was away from family. He wanted to hurry up and come back. And so they're trying everything to push paperwork. Finally, I get my orders in the month of May. And so May of 2020, I go out there. And this was around the time when the whole George Floyd stuff was happening, And it was just very, very weird. Just kind of seeing all that from a distance when you're deployed and seeing it on the news. And but also having to work with all the masking policies, and they're trying to come up with this vaccine, and
you got your quarantine for 2 weeks in another country before you get into country.
Yes. Yeah. That's exactly what we had to do. As soon as we landed, they drove us to a camp that was away from the camp and we had to quarantine for 2 weeks. And that was a weird time. Thankfully we didn't have to do that leaving, because some of the rotations before me, they did have to quarantine before they left.
Okay.
But, and then they had to quarantine again when they got home.
So it's an extra month.
Exactly. Yeah. Of just limbo. You're not doing anything. But thankfully I didn't have to do that leaving. Nice. Now I did have to quarantine back home, which was fine because I was on leave anyway. But yeah, it was just interesting. And this was actually really cool. Jordan, have you ever been to Jordan?
I haven't.
Beautiful country.
I want to go to Petra.
Oh yeah, dude. It's beautiful. There's Petra, the Dead Sea, Jaresh, Ajlan Castle, the Wadi Rum, Wadi Majid. There's all these beautiful areas. And so because COVID was happening, no one was traveling. And so when I was there at Jordan, our commander, our O6, we did these things called refits. And refits is when every Saturday you're allowed to leave the camp and go experience the country. You can go to Petra, you can go to Dead Sea. There were some parameters though, like you couldn't get within 25 kilometers of the border. You couldn't go to certain pockets because there was known ISIS activity. But for the most part, you can go wherever you want. And so, dude, every Saturday for 4 months, I would go to a different spot in Jordan. So I went to Petra, Dead Sea a few times. I went to the site where Jesus was baptized.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that was cool, man. That was cool.
What's it look like?
I have a picture. I can show you. Yeah, but it's Jesus was baptized in the Jordan, so there's obviously the Jordan that runs through there. But as far as what it looks like, it's not pretty.
Okay.
Because the water is gross. It's not like this. When you read about Jesus' baptism in the scriptures, like, don't imagine blue water. Imagine brown water. I mean, okay. It's a gross river.
Somehow seems fitting though.
Yeah, it's very dirty. But it's not like this huge wide river either. It looks more like a creek. But I mean, our Lord was baptized there, and so it was pretty surreal. I went to Mount Nebo, which is where Moses died. A very interesting place. But anyway, so but because no one was traveling, we had these places all to ourselves. So I can show you pictures later. But when we were at Petra, for example, we were the only ones there, and it was eerie, but very cool.
Yeah, I bet.
We had the whole place to ourselves. And so if you look at my pictures, there's like no tourists in the background. It's just me and this crazy, awesome structure. It's pretty wild. And usually they would have bazaars there, like shops, and they're selling things. It was a ghost town. There were the tents and the shops were there, but no one was there. It was pretty wild. So yeah, that was an interesting deployment for sure. If you want to call it a deployment, you know what I mean?
Well, that's the weird thing about deployment. So a lot of, I guess it depends on the environment, but a lot of times, man, it's this weird, like, kind of dichotomy of like, you're at least in my experience, it's like you're operational, you're doing real world stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also this very kind of like domestic, like the downtime. It's like, it doesn't look or feel like a deployment at all.
Right.
It's just weird, and that always reminded me of like, you watch the old World War II movies and stuff like that. And like these people are over in Europe, they're like in a nice cafe with a pretty girl. And then the next day they're in a trench getting blown in half. And it's like, it's like, I'm not comparing my experience to World War II, but like, I kind of get that dichotomy because it really is like that.
It is like that, man. Yeah. I mean, now my deployment to Iraq was different because we were literally working every single day. There was no weekend. There was no refit. We were pulling 18 to 17 hour shifts. I mean, we were grinding for 9 months straight. But the Jordan was different. We had those breaks, and it was nice because you kind of gain your sanity.
Yeah.
You know, when you're working with the same people on barely any sleep every single day, it's like, it can kind of get to you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But staying busy helps, but it still gets to you. But yeah, that Jordan deployment was good. I mean, we had a very serious mission. It was a very information driven mission. I worked with a ton of different nations in Jordan, but when it came to the refits, it was like a vacation, man. Like I'm out floating in the Dead Sea with a drink in my hand, and it's like, what's going on?
That's wild, yeah.
Yeah.
So you said that kind of your mission, your kind of calling, was to kind of bring Christ into DoD.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, like, what did that look like once you got over to JSOC there? Because I know certain squadrons they just happen to be faithful dudes, like meat eaters who will pray before hitting the target,
Mm-hmm. Some, not all, some.
Right.
Yep.
So, there's pockets here and there. So I'm just really, I guess what I'm getting at is I'm curious if you ever saw any of that anywhere. Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, so if, within the tier 1 squadrons, if you're around those guys, seeing people who walk with Jesus is a little more prominent. But where I was with more of the support units with Intel and kind of like those like outskirt units, like we're all part of the same command, but it's a little less prominent. And so for the most part, I worked with guys who, man, lots of pride, lots of ego, for sure. Lots, like, humility is not common, selflessness, a lot of like the Christian values and virtues were almost like, it was almost cheesy. It was looked at as that, when people knew that I was a Christian, I mean, I would get made fun of for it, I mean, straight up. And it wasn't like they were bullies. It was more of like pokes,
Yeah, sure.
But I could tell what they were doing. But this is how I did it, because yes, there was a mission to do, and I was an officer, so there was some authority there and influence, and there were responsibilities and tasks and teams that I had to run. But underneath all of that, it was the way I treated people, and any opportunity that I had. There were moments where I had to ignore my rank, and I know that sounds weird, but I had to ignore my rank in the sense that any opportunity I had to start a Bible study or a small group, it's a lot easier when you're downrange because you have time for it. You're with each other all the time. You're not going back home when the day is done. You're living together. Anytime I had chances to do that, I would take it. And what's cool is that, people are more hungry for that stuff than they realize, especially when they're away from their families. You kind of unfold people a little bit, and I would have really good responses with anytime I would throw an invitation out, like, hey, I'm doing a Bible study at this time, this day. I'm inviting you. Would love for you to be there. The response was actually pretty good. And now, not everyone would show up. Not everybody wanted to be a part of those things. But I've learned this, that when God calls you to a place and to a people, you've got to make the most of your time. You have to. Like Paul, when you read the book of Acts, Paul did that. Everywhere he went, he was intentional. He taught any chance he had. The Bible even says he would debate with people in the synagogues. Any opportunity Paul had to preach the gospel and make the name of Jesus known, he took it. And so in the military, it was almost like that, And there were a lot of times where I had to get over myself and be like, okay, I don't, how do I say this? I'm going to talk about Jesus, even if I look like a fool. I see a lot of people kind of put the tail between their legs, and they're like, I don't want to come off as weird and religious, and I don't want people to see me that way. And it's like, if you're really walking with Jesus truly, you're not going to come off like that at all. Because, going back to those college guys that I was hanging out with, they didn't come off to me like that, but they were walking with Jesus genuinely. And, oh dude, I want to share this story because this is really cool. So right before I got out of the Army, I had my final OER, my officer evaluation report. And my senior rater was my squadron commander. And she was in Paris doing a TDY trip. And so we couldn't, usually for a senior rating counseling, you want to counsel in person and go over the OER, but we couldn't do that. She was in Paris, so it was a phone call. So I'm on the phone with my commander. And she was a great commander. She was awesome. She wasn't a Christian, which is an important detail for what I'm about to say. But so we're on this phone call and we're going over this OER, and she was telling me, she says, Keith, I've never said this about a junior officer before. Out of all the officers I've rated, I've never said this about any of them, but I'm going to say it about you because this is what you are. She said this. She said, you're a friend to the squadron. And I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Not that I was like buddy, like fraternizing, nothing like that. Because, sometimes the Army's weird about that. But she said I was a friend to the squadron. And when she said that, the Holy Spirit spoke to me in that moment. And I was reminded of when Jesus sat with his disciples and he says, hey, I no longer call you servant. I now call you friend. And then later, Jesus says, no greater love has anyone than this, that they would lay down their life for their friends. And that's what Jesus did. He laid his life down for his friends, for us. We're friends of God now. That's what he calls us. And so when she said that I was a friend to the squadron, I was like, that spoke a lot to me, because it showed me how she saw me and who I was to the unit, and who I am to the people in the unit, because not in the military, not a lot of people are seen as like friend of the organization. But when she said that to me, I was like, that's awesome. That's cool.
You feel like you did the thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was my last OER.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was almost like a culminating moment for me of like, okay, Lord, I did what you called me to do. And whether people got saved or not, I know some people did, because that did happen, but again, we're not responsible for people, especially their salvation. Everyone's responsible for their own stuff, but we are responsible to them, and how we live our lives preaches sermons to them, and so yeah, mentally and spiritually, I was like, okay, I did my duty, my spiritual duty, obviously my military duty, but and then when this might sound a little cheesy, but when I got my DD-214 and it says that I was discharged honorably, to me, it was like God was telling that to me.
Yeah,
like,
no, that's not cheesy at all, man. That's
yeah, like, hey, man, like this thing I called you to, you're discharged honorably, and then on to Grace Church, the next thing.
Yeah, well done.
So,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, well, that was like the well done for me.
Yeah.
So it was really sweet.
That's very cool, man.
Yeah.
It's you make a good point too about humility and just kind of doing the thing regardless. Because you're right, a lot of people either they just won't, like they're just timid about it. They understand, they've experienced it themselves, like somebody being over the top and like, yeah, that's just weird. Yeah. Like I know from experience that's going to push more people away than it's going to pull in. So they don't want to do that, so they don't do anything. Or they go the other way and they really go out of the way to show you, I'm not like other Christians. And that just gets real weird too, right?
Yeah.
And it comes down to the sincerity that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And humility. That's just a good testament to the power of humbling yourself. Like even, not to turn it around on me, but even a micro example, like just asking people to come sit down for this thing like that it's weird, man. It's awkward. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And that
feels like it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's humbling, because I've never talked to these people. I'm just talking to who I feel led to ask out of nowhere. Never talked to them before a lot of times. And it's humbling because it's awkward and embarrassing, but it's also a really excellent opportunity to submit.
Yes.
Right. Like, do you believe that I'm calling you to do this? Yes. Then will you do it? Yep. Roger that. I will do it. Let's go get humbled a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what blows my mind, dude, is service members are some of the only kind of people who would actually get the kingdom of God. Because I've learned this, that when you take ministry and military, put them side by side, there's very little differences. Very little, I mean, one wears a uniform, the other doesn't, whatever. But the military exists not for profit, not for revenue, not for it exists to defend the homeland. Like, it exists to accomplish a mission. The church is the same thing. The church exists to accomplish a mission, which is the Great Commission: make disciples of all the nations, preach the gospel to all creation, right? And there's so many, this is what blows my mind, is there's so many parallels and similarities between the church and the military. Like, and again, I sometimes come back to this, that service members would totally, if they just had an encounter with Jesus, man, there's very little they would have to change to understand how the church and ministry operates.
Yeah.
you know? So like you look at Ephesians 4, for example, like Grace Church, man, we talk about Ephesians 4 all the time. Christ gifted the church with apostles, prophets, teachers, evangelists, all of that so that they can equip the saints so that they can do the work of ministry, so that we can build to unity in a mature man, right? So that we can put away silly doctrine and actually grow in Jesus. Like that's what Ephesians 4 is all about. And in the military is the similar way. Like there's commanders, there's this, there's that, and it's all for training for the mission, you know? And I mean, there's a lot to say about that. But you know, going back to humility, that is unfortunately a quality that's just not valued in the military anymore.
Yeah.
And it's almost like humility is seen as weakness almost. Meekness is not weakness. I've heard it said, you know, because in the military, you know, you got to be strong, you got to be capable, you got to be competent, you got to be able to do your job. You want to be reliable to your other men, and to hold character traits that are seemingly opposite to what they value, can, you know, there's almost like a fear of carrying those things because you don't want to be seen or treated as different. But man, when eternity's at stake, like you don't really care about those things,
Right?
You know,
Yeah.
And it's not about relating to them; it's about treating them as Christ did, you know, like loving them and serving them and all of that. And by doing that, they'll see, because here's the thing: they're not seeing you; they're seeing Christ in you. You're dead. You've been bought. You're done away with. You're buried. But it's now Christ in you. So when you treat them when you treat them the way Christ treats us, that's what they're tasting and seeing is Jesus himself. And I believe that's why Jesus says in Matthew 25, when he's talking about Judgment Day, and he says, I'm going to gather everyone as a shepherd gathers the sheep, and I'm going to separate the sheep from the goats. And then to the sheep, he says, hey, you guys are amazing. You guys fed me when I was hungry, gave me water when I was thirsty, clothed me when I was naked. And then the sheep are like, when, Lord? When did we do that? And Jesus is going to say, well, you've done it to the least of these, so therefore you've done it unto me. Go now into your rest, you know? And then he's going to look at the goats and say the opposite. He's like, hey, you did not do these things to me. And they're going to be like, when, Lord? When were you naked? When were you sick? When were you hungry and thirsty and in prison? And Jesus is like, well, you didn't do it to the least of these, my brethren. Therefore, you didn't do it unto me. Away with you, you who practice lawlessness, you know? And that's a scary thought, you know? But all that to say that when we do it to the least of them, you know, we do it unto Jesus himself. But on the other side of that, they see and taste the character of God, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully that makes sense.
It does make sense.
Yeah.
It does make sense. And kind of on another note with that, though, it's a good example of just like how high of a regard God holds us in.
Yes. Yeah.
That, you know, he's I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah,
but it's, you know, he's saying, hey, if you did it, you didn't do it to me specifically, but you did it to one of mine.
Yep.
So you did it to me.
Exactly. Yeah. So in Jesus's eyes, there's this inscrutable link between how we treat other people, especially other believers, and how that's linked to how we treat God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, God, it's almost as if God takes it very, very personally.
Right.
With the way we treat people.
Right. That's what I'm getting at. He wouldn't take it so personally if he didn't hold us in high regard. And maybe that's not the right way to say it, but I guess if he just didn't value us.
Yeah. I mean, because we are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Mm-hmm.
And to harm that, because we think of it like this. We are the only creation on earth that bears his image. Think about that. Like oceans don't have his image. Mountains don't have his image. Dogs and cats don't have his image. No creation bears the image of God but us. And that's not to exalt. I'm not saying that to exalt us in any way, but because of that, like we ought to revere the image of God in people. You know what I mean? Yeah. And and not just that, but the fact that Christ died for them. So you could say this, that God, he like doubly owns us. He owns us because, one, he created us in his image, right? And that should be enough. But more than that, he purchased us on the cross. So he doubly owns us now, you know? And so, in fact, dude, not to get on a tangent, but C.S. Lewis has this wonderful quote about this idea that we're talking about. He says that if we truly, truly saw the people the way God sees them, C.S. Lewis says we would be tempted to worship them. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's very well put there.
And what sin does is distort that to where we don't see ourselves the way God sees us, and we certainly don't see others the way God sees them. And you know, going back to unforgiveness and all that, dude, like unforgiveness is the headache of heaven, you know, because we're not seeing the image of God in them. They're not seeing it in us. And sin is coming in as a wedge to separate and divide people. And that's what it wants to do, you know? And so that's why Paul says in one of his letters, he says, put away the sin that so easily entangles us, you know?
Yeah. So you're kind of noticing little pockets of faithful people, but kind of in different parts, not really so much where you're at, but you do see it around there, but you are able to kind of disciple some folks and see some good fruit from there. And then you get your final OER, you get a nice, well done, which is, it's gotta be a great feeling.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
And so you move on to, well, first of all, let me back up just a little bit, because you kind of not really touched on it, but you were around an area that so far has come up, I think, pretty much every time I've sat down with somebody. It's the issue of idols. And you've kind of hinted at that few times about how, you know, the military just doesn't encourage humility at all, and how we really just essentially we worship ourselves. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but exactly. It's either me for what I've done or you for what you've done. The whatever your unit patch is, or all the little.
Oh man.
Yeah,
you're hitting the nail on the head.
I mean, I was talking to Jason Hazelton about that. You know, that's how. I mean, you know very well that's how you size somebody up in the Army. You start their unit patch. Is that a unit that I respect?
Yep.
Okay. Well, does he have any tab? Okay, but has he been into any schools? Do they have any special skills? All right. Well, does he outrank me, or is he a rank that I respect? Right, has he been deployed? You know what I mean?
Like, and you start to judge him.
Exactly. Yeah, man. Either judge him or put him on a pedestal.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's still judgment. But
you see their chest before you see their face.
Yeah, exactly. And some people, I always used to call it leading with their chest. They would walk into a room like, make sure my chest is clear so you can see me. Right? Hey, you know, hey, CW3 here, or whatever it is.
Look
you know,
at the things I've done and been at. Yeah,
exactly. Or you got the folks who just seems like maybe their right arm's a little heavy because they keep wanting to throw it out front because they want you to see that deployment patch or whatever.
Or like
it is.
The Tower of Power. Airborne, Rangers, Sappers, Special Forces.
all the things. Yeah. So, but it seems like you didn't have that issue, which is
no, not really.
I mean, that's great, and I would imagine that's probably because you were saved before you went in, and you held on to that. It didn't pull you away. I would imagine that. Does that seem accurate to you?
Yeah, and I'm thinking about that scripture that Paul says. He says, I boasted in nothing but in Christ and Him crucified. And that's what Jesus helped me to do as well.
Okay.
You know, I was more proud of the fact that I was a son of God, that He changed my life, you know, that I am who I am now because of Him. I was more proud about that than the fact that I was a part of a prestigious unit, doing these cool, exciting deployments, going to these cool, exciting training opportunities. And if you're not careful, that can easily puff up ego.
Yeah.
Right. And really, it's sad, man, because operationally, those things exist to create razor sharp weapons to reach mission success, you know? But culturally, we make him out to be that measuring of judging people. Like, ooh, look at me, I survived Ranger School. I wasn't recycled. Right. Or look at me, I was selected for this. Or yeah, man. And so there's this unspoken need to humble yourself. You probably heard of the term silent professional, that operators are like silent professionals. And that's just a way of saying that they don't talk about themselves a lot. I remember so this is a great example. I met a SEAL once. He was a SEAL Team 6 guy. Super humble dude, man. I'm not sure if he was a believer or not, but I just know I was talking with him a little bit, and just very humble guy, very soft-spoken, but a lethal weapon. You know what I'm saying? Like, this guy's a trained killer. So, but I didn't know he was SEAL Team 6 after I asked a bunch of questions, because I went up to him and I said, hey, like, because I noticed he was in a Navy uniform. Now, being an Army guy, I'm not really too familiar with Navy uniforms and what everything means on their uniform. Like, I know what the trident is, but other than that, I don't know anything else. And so I just remember, like, hey, you're in the Navy. Like, how long have you been in? Oh, this long. Okay, like, what do you do in the Navy? Oh, this, and what unit you're part of? Oh, and so, like, he was very ominous. Like, it was almost like he was trying not to mention it. Not to, like, spill secretive stuff or classified stuff, but I could tell he didn't want to talk about himself.
Yeah. You didn't want that attention. Like, and my goodness, they're a Team 6 guy.
Yeah. And it probably took like 10 questions for him to finally say, like, oh yeah, I'm with Dev Crew, and it's like, oh man. And so that for me, that would be an excellent example of what a silent professional is. Mm-hmm. Like you're fully aware that you're a part of this prestigious unit. You got these privileges, you have these opportunities and experiences, but for the sake of treating humans like humans, and not making that thing the main thing, that's not what you default to. That's not the first thing you mention, right? And so I've always respected people who did that. And at Grace Church, like, we got tons of guys like that.
So many.
So many. And so it's almost like, okay, how do you delineate someone who's just trying to keep it secret from someone who's trying to keep it humble, And I think words and countenance and character plays a lot into that. But
yeah, and I'm not saying I haven't run into this with anyone at Grace, but there's definitely a certain personality type out in the world who keep things quiet. I don't know if this is going to make sense, but like, they won't talk about what they did, mm-hmm. but it's a loud silence, if that makes sense. Like, yep. They're deliberately not talking about it so that you will invent a history in your mind and, give them sort of the respect that they didn't earn, if that makes sense. And that's a weird one too, but
yeah.
But
I think there's a term for that. It's called pride of a worm.
Pride of a worm, huh?
Yeah. So like a worm doesn't speak,
right?
But it could have that silent pride,
right?
And I can't accuse anyone of having that.
Sure.
I get what you're saying. Sometimes it is like that. It's like, hey, I'm purposely not saying it so that I can come across as someone special,
right? Yeah,
and someone cool,
right? But I guess my point in bringing that up is it still all comes down to idolizing something. Like that the person doing that is idolizing something that they didn't do. Mm-hmm. And it's I don't know, man. It's just kind of breaks my heart, because it's like actually sort of the genesis of this podcast came about the initial sort of, because you always kind of have to have an initial like reason, mm-hmm. other than it being a calling. I felt called to do it, but I was like, why? But like what? Like what is it that I need to address?
Yeah.
And I happened to be deployed. And it was one of the about half the time I was a singleton. The other half, it was just as a 2-man element. Yeah. This was one of the times when it was a 2-man element, and the guy just happened to be a believer, and he's still like, he's been very much like a spiritual mentor to me, just all in, just very, very good. We used to just cruise around, even working or not working in those weird kind of off times that I was talking about, just talking about faith stuff, but it just sort of really highlighted to me because I knew I was on the way out. And I hate that I'm talking about myself again, but like I knew I was on the way out.
How dare you, Dan?
Get on a podcast and talk. But so I knew I was on the way out. Like it was, I had maybe a few more deployments and I needed to be done.
Yeah.
Because of that thing that I was talking about earlier, like time is the sand is passing through the choke point in that hourglass, and I can't put it back. And these are our best years. They are going, and I'm just not there, you know? So anyway, I knew it was coming to an end, and I was wrestling with that a lot because, again, I had allowed it to become my identity. I'm the guy that does this thing, you know? I like to think maybe I didn't have as much of an ego about it as is in some places, but I can't really say that truthfully. I just don't know.
Yeah.
It had definitely become who I was. So like my identity was what I did.
Mm-hmm.
But I was, again, I knew I was transitioning out of it. I was getting real deep into my faith with this good friend of mine. And I just sort of realized like, I'm not alone in this. Like this thing that I recognize I'm struggling with, it's very common.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's people just, you put yourself and the things that you've done on a pedestal because that's the culture, and you have to let it go.
Yeah.
Like I guess what I'm trying to say, I'm kind of rambling, but I got to the point where I realized like I have to let this go.
Mm-hmm.
This man has to die.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing, talking to my friend, just really, like I said, digging deep into faith, recognizing that there's the answer. Like I don't want to say the way out, but like, that's what I need. That's all I need. I don't need this. Like I can be comfortable letting this die because there's just this is what actually matters.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
And then anyway, just kind of wrapping up a long-winded point, it just sort of clicked with me. I was like, okay, you're calling me to do this thing. Well, like who should I start with? Who do you want me to talk to? And it was like, how about guys like you? How about guys like you who need to hear that it's okay to let it go?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. And on that, you know, talking about the idea of being proud about your specialty, you know, and kind of letting that fuel your ego. So I, who was it? I think it was General Miller. He was one of the CGs for JSOC, and awesome guy, by the way. He was a captain when Black Hawk Down, Gothic Serpent was going on.
Okay.
Yeah. And anyway, awesome guy. And General Miller said this thing once, and it makes total sense. He said, your proximity to the X or the objective does not determine your value.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it is.
And because operators, they're kind of looked at as the trigger pullers. You know, they're the cool guys. They're the guys who do the exciting stuff, the real work. They're the guys shooting people in the face and going to these cool trainings and wearing the cool gear and doing all this stuff. And they have the cool stories. And it's easy to look at them and, to your point, idolize them because your job doesn't seem as sexy.
Right.
But what General Miller was saying is your proximity to the X, or where the enemy is, where the objective is, where the mission is, does not determine your value in this enterprise. Everyone here is here because someone saw you as valuable. And in an effort to humble everyone, he would occasionally say, everyone is expendable. And I think that's good to hear every now and then.
Yeah, for sure it is.
You know what I mean? Now, the truth is, there are certain individuals in that unit who are not expendable. Like, they absolutely need to be there. Like, things will fail if they're not there. That's just the truth. But man, when he said that, you can apply that to the church. So let me say it like this. Your proximity to the pulpit does not determine your value in the church.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because some people look at the pastor and idolize them.
Yes.
Some people look at the preacher, at Ryan Peterson. Dude, I'm just going to be real with you. Some people idolize me. And I don't like that. I don't want that. I've no kidding. And I'm not saying this to toot my own horn. I've had people come up to me at Grace saying, man, I wish we heard from you more. I wish we heard your sermons more. And I've had to very lovingly correct people and say, listen, I don't want to be heard more. We need the Holy Spirit more. We don't need more of Keith. We don't need more of Ryan. We don't need more of this guy. We need more of the Holy Spirit. But the Holy Spirit speaks through us because these are the people God has raised up to equip the saints, you know? And so this happens in the church. And so so if you take the hold on, there it is, the scripture where it says every joint supplies, you know, dude, that's the truth. Like every joint in the body of Christ supplies. It's not just the pastor. It's not just the very gifted and anointed evangelist or speaker. It's not the celebrity pastor. It's not this famous Christian author who has millions of copies of books. Like it's not. Every member supplies. And if you can apply that scripture to the military and have people get that, like, hey, every joint supplies, every service member, every unit, every team, everyone supplies for the greater good of the mission. If the DoD could capture that, I think it'll be a lot healthier culture.
Yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean?
I agree. Absolutely, man.
Yeah,
absolutely. Definitely squash down at least a little bit of that ego. But man, that's just really
yeah.
applying it to the church. That's refreshing to hear, man, because it's something outside looking in, you know, not being on staff. And candidly, if someone even asked me to be on staff, I would say that's a hard no. You know, like so.
And I respect that a lot.
But outside looking in, it's you know, it's just a lot more apparent, you know, when you're not sort of, that's not your, like, your job isn't in the building. You're not just immersed in that culture.
Yeah.
It's really easy to see how, sadly, you know, I'm not calling anybody out specifically, but it's just a fact. Some people buy into it. Mm-hmm. And we've kind of talked about that before with other people, but like some people get that title, man. And it's just, it's a shame. It's sad, but it happens.
It
you
happens.
know?
And
and it's like, and you get the people, like you said, you can tell they're giving you a little bit more attention than maybe they should. And sometimes people just accept it. And, you know.
Yep. And as a pastor, especially a pastor at Grace Church specifically, because you and I both know Grace is probably the largest congregation in Moore County, right? When you're a pastor at a church like that, you're automatically a public figure within Moore County. I mean, I can't go to Aldi or Harris Teeter without someone like recognizing me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And not that stuff goes in my head, but this dude, and what we're touching on, by the way, is stuff that we talk about in our pastoral meetings. Okay. Sometimes we talk about public interactions and, you know, how we present ourselves and what's the impression like. You know, are we the goal is not to defend an image like a church image, but just keeping ourselves consecrated, you know, before God's people. And because like the Levites in the Old Testament, they had to do that, you know. And so, yeah, there's this principle of, and this is where integrity comes into play a lot. But as long as the pastor is healthy, because we're walking with Jesus well, we're following Jesus close. We're not like Peter at that one point where it says he followed at a distance. But if we're following close, everything will take care of itself. If we're seeking first the kingdom, everything else will follow, you know? And so you don't have to strive to look a certain way in front of people, to behave a certain way. It's just natural. When you have fellowship with Jesus and constant devotion, it just oozes out of you. It's just natural, you know, and that takes work. It's kind of like marriage. Like that relationship with Christ takes work. It takes devotion. It takes spiritual rhythms and disciplines. You got to get in the Word. You got to be a man of prayer. You know, you got to value those things. And unfortunately, to your point, yeah, it happens that it gets to people's heads. And it becomes a position and instead of a disposition, because that's truly what it is. Being a pastor is a disposition because you're serving the people. And Jesus, what did Jesus say? If whoever is the least among you will become the greatest, whoever's the greatest will actually serve those people, you know? And so, Ryan said this once, and it was so good. He said, he says that servanthood is the practice of greatness. That's good.
Yeah.
You know, great, greatness is not the practice of greatness. Serving is, you know, because in the kingdom of God, things are kind of flipped. You know, in the world, you gotta make a name for yourself. You gotta build your reputation. You gotta build your image and build your finances and whatever. It's like you're building your own kingdom, in other words. But in the kingdom of God, which some people say it's upside down. I don't like to say that. I like to say it's right side up. The kingdom,
okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the kingdom of God is right side up. It's the world that's upside down.
That's a good point.
And because the kingdom of God is God's reality, and we need to look to his reality to see what's true. And plus there's sin in the world. So that's why that's why we're upside down. And so, but in the kingdom, we're doing everything for his glory, you know? And if people look at us, like we're professional deflectors. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that's not for me. That's for Jesus. Nope.
Yeah.
Those words aren't for me. That's for Jesus. That compliment's not for me. That's for Jesus, you know? Because again, we're dead. Like, hey, if someone compliments me, they're not complimenting my words because I didn't speak my truth. I spoke his truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like if they're complimenting me, I just see it as, hey, Lord, this is what they're saying about you and your word. So.
Yeah, man, I think that's the right way to look at it, man.
Yeah.
Whatever my opinion's worth, man, I think that's the right way to look at it.
Yeah.
Kind of in all things, not just obviously in terms of your position, but just position is just where it kind of, or position or disposition, like you're saying, it's just kind of where it, again, like you're saying, because of the culture and of the world in general. It's not just here in the United States, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
There's always something, there's always status markers, you know what I mean?
That westernized thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Or even not westernized. I mean, even in third world countries, like, oh, you're the guy with a homemade motorcycle. Oh, you're the the mayor of the little shanty town or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's just always something that people use to put themselves above other people. It's a weird thing, but you touched on it earlier, and it's also something that I think me and Jason Hazelton talked about. It's that it's still in us. We're always looking for the shot caller. We're always looking for, who's kind of, I think I said with Jason, the bona fides, like who,
bona fides.
Yeah. Who is it? Who's the senior here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of like going back to the uniform. Oh, well, this guy's going to be in charge. Look at all this tabs and badges and stuff like that. But it's like that everywhere in the world. We're always looking for those status markers to tell us who is the shot caller. And there's only one. It's none of us. We're looking in the wrong place.
Yeah, man.
Anyway, that's
we're all at the foot of the cross. Dude.
Yeah, exactly. So getting off that soapbox. Okay. So, man, I feel like we're probably kind of rounding it out, but, I also feel like, what are we missing, man? I feel like we're missing something.
Sometimes people ask me about how I transitioned from the military to grace, what that looked like.
Okay, yeah. I am curious about that because you said there was some overlap, right? You were still in.
Yes, yeah. Okay. And yes, this might be a good thing to touch on because it's not really a common story for someone to leave the military to do ministry. Mm-hmm. It's usually leave the military to be a contractor,
right?
Or just outright retire or just, do some other civilian job. It's kind of a unique thing to do. Like, man, I was an intel officer for special operations. Now I'm a pastor at a church in North Carolina, Yeah. So how did that happen? And so, again, the military has always been ministry for me. So, I've always viewed myself as a disciple maker, a soul winner, all of those things. And so the idea of becoming a pastor wasn't too foreign. It wasn't too different. And so this, my transition from Army to Grace happened when I was driving home from Bragg one day. I finished a work day, and so I'm in my truck. I'm commuting back home, and Pastor AJ gave me a call. Now at this point, AJ and I are very close. He's probably the one pastor on staff that I was most close with, and AJ, dude, we had like a 2-hour long conversation on the phone where AJ was explaining to me that Grace Church they were wanting to hire someone to direct their young adults program. Now, the word pastor wasn't thrown around in that conversation, but he made it about the young adults ministry needing some kind of leadership, someone to come in and take that program. Because COVID really hurt it. It went from like 90 people to 30 people. It was kind of crazy. And the person that was over it before me was Jonathan. I don't know if you know who Jonathan is. He's Randy's son. So Jonathan was the students pastor before Joshua. Jonathan was over both students and young adults. Now, young adults had a different name. It was called 2030. But he was over both, and he was a very busy person. I was
going to say, that's a lot.
And Jonathan's the kind of guy, like, he really wants to make these ministries work, to grow them. And in Jonathan's words, if one ministry was healthy, it was at the detriment of the other. And so there was like this flip-flop game for a while. Anyway, so Grace identified a need that they wanted someone to full-time take over the young adults. So AJ, my name was thrown out there on the whiteboard because AJ knew that I had experience in college ministry, that I small group led, I led mission trips. I was a leader in college ministry. College ministry and young adult ministry are they're not the same, but they're very, very similar, And so AJ gave me a call. He's like, hey, man, I know you might have military prospects and all of that, but, we're having conversations over here at Grace Church, and your name was thrown around. And so AJ, dude, he was very candid. He was like, you know what? Have you ever thought about becoming a pastor? Do you see yourself becoming a pastor? Where do you sense God is leading you? What is he calling you to? And these were big questions, man, because my plan was to do 20 years in the Army. Like I did not sign up for the BRS, the blended retirement system. I didn't do that because I wanted to ride out the 20. And so AJ gave me a lot of stuff to really think about and pray into. And so I took it as potential doors being opened. Now, the timing of this was interesting because I was approaching the end of my 8-year contract. I had an 8-year contract with the Army, and I was approaching the 8 years. And so I was at a fork in the road where I could either continue on in the Army, go to Captain's Careers course and do a 2-year ADSO and then just ride it out, right? Or I could take on this opportunity with Grace. And there were some other things I was thinking about, like I could get off ADOS orders and continue in the reserves and do a job, maybe contracting or something. Dude, at one point I thought about going FBI.
Oh, okay.
I thought about that, yeah, because during my deployments, I worked a lot with fly team agents, and I really enjoyed working with them. And I was serious about it too. I was looking into the fly team. I almost applied for it, but I decided not to do it because Taryn wasn't really at peace with me doing it. And so anyway, when AJ was talking to me about this, I talked to Taryn about it. I said, hey babe, AJ and I had this conversation. I told him I'd pray into this. I didn't tell him no. I didn't tell him yes. And so Taryn was praying with me about it. And the more as time went on and things were developing, it became more clear that my time in the Army was coming to an end. And this opportunity with Grace could be my next thing. And it was a scary thought because this is a dramatic change. We're talking a change in our financials, a change in our healthcare, a change in our family dynamic, everything. And so one conversation led to another, and then eventually I talked with Randy, and Randy and I had another 2-hour conversation. And then we had another 2-hour conversation after that one. And so it was funny. I actually never really officially interviewed for Grace Church. I just had conversations with Randy. That was kind of like the Randy way of doing things. And in one of those conversations, Randy just straight up gave me the job offer. He's like, hey, I think you're the guy, and we'd love to have you. And talk to Taryn, talk to the Army, whatever you need to do, but just know that we're very interested in having you join the team. And I was like, okay, all right. And so I just had to get some things together, had to think through some things and pray through some things. And yeah, man, we made the decision. We're like, okay, like let's do it. This is clearly from God. Yes, there's some risk involved with, and because Randy was very clear. He was like, hey, it's like, just so you know, I can't pay you the way as much as the Army's paying you. And healthcare looks a little different, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, okay, like I get that. But what was more important for me and Taryn was calling. Like, where is God bringing us? And because that's what we're interested in. We just wanted to be obedient. And so I talked with the Army, the leaders there, and we're like, yep, I'm going to out-process. I'm going to get off ADOS orders. I'm not going to renew my packet. And so I out-processed with my squadron, with JSOC, eventually Fort Bragg. What actually ended up happening, this was actually really cool. When I got off ADOS orders, I went back into the reserves because I had one more year. And so when I mentioned the overlap, this is what that means. So I was officially hired at Grace August of 2022, 21 or 22. I think it was 21. And for the first year working at Grace, I was also drilling once a month as a reservist.
Okay.
Yeah. But here's the cool part. Where I was drilling for the same unit that I was on active duty for. So I was still at JSOC.
Okay.
Yeah, I was still in the JIB, all of that. In fact, I held my same title and I worked at my same desk.
Wow.
But I was just there once a month.
Okay. That's wild.
But what's cool, so for them, I was completely off their books. I was free chicken to them. So I would come in once a month, do some things that needed to be done. And then I did that for a whole year. And then when that year was over, I reached my 8 years. And then I fully out-processed to Fort Bragg. And then I was full-time, 100% full-time at Grace. And then it's been history ever since. Huh. That's when I started growing the hair out and the beard.
Nice. Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. They didn't give you a relaxed grooming standard waiver?
Right, yeah. So, man, it was God's goodness, man. Like sometimes veterans have a really hard time transitioning, and that sucks, man. And I talk with a lot of guys at Grace who go through that stuff. And that's why they ask me a lot, like, man, how was that transition for you? And I get into this story. But it really was the goodness of God of I had no lapse in employment. I had no lapse in healthcare because I think having that overlap really helped because it wasn't a sudden shift. It was a gradual just phasing out and then phasing in. Like it was almost like a fade, like I faded in, faded out kind of thing.
Crossfade.
Yeah. So it was super helpful. It was very nice. And what's cool still, man, is although I'm not working there anymore, I still see those guys all the time because they go to Grace.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like a lot of those guys go to Grace. Yeah. And Becca Cordes, for example. Okay. So you know who I'm talking about on staff, Becca? She does Connect Step.
Okay.
Yeah, so Becca, I worked with her husband, John Cordes, at the unit before I started working with his wife, Becca. So now I'm like working with both.
Okay.
So it's just kind of cool.
Yeah, that is very cool.
So still in the not in the family, but still in the family.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a real natural transition, is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah.
That's very cool, man.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. I guess I don't know. Maybe I'd just kind of like to get your thoughts a little bit on because one of the things you do, and I think you're still over like back to baptisms and everything, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So and that's something that I know is very important to you. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd like to get your thoughts a little bit on that because one of the coolest moments for me as far as baptisms, those things tend to be emotional,
Oh man. Oh yeah.
But man, one of the coolest moments was when Matt Templeton came up.
Yeah, that was something.
Such a cool, just genuine moment,
dude.
Man, I think I was running sound, so I was back in the sound booth, and and you were just like, all right, who's next? You're like, Matt,
yeah.
Jurgen, and just this big hug, man, just that was such a great moment. So, but my point is, it was very clear how much it really means to you, just the baptism in and of itself. So I don't know if you want to kind of share some thoughts on that.
Yeah. So what's funny is I did not ask to be in charge of baptisms. That was something that was asked of me to be responsible for. So when I jumped on staff, the conversation was young adults. It was about young adults and directing that program. And this is all before I was ordained, mind you. And so when I was talking with AJ about my job description and signing everything, making everything official. On my job description, it said young adults and baptisms, and AJ was explaining how they wanted to give that to me to run. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. That's new, and I'll do my best. And so, so being in charge of, if you had to throw a title on it, it's baptism director or baptism pastor now, if whatever you want to call it. But being in charge of baptisms just simply means that I am coordinating, planning, and facilitating the baptism services. That doesn't mean I baptize everyone. I don't want to do that. The families, parents, and disciple makers, they're the ones baptizing because that's biblical. But as far as ensuring that families have an excellent baptism experience, that's what I'm responsible for. And it's a privilege, bro. It's so cool. The God has grown that portfolio quite a bit to the point where we actually have volunteers who serve on, like baptisms became a place that volunteers can serve at. Because before like the idea of serving for baptisms wasn't really a thing. But what I did is that because we're a multi-site church, I stood up baptism teams. They're not staff, they're volunteers. And I even stood up coordinators. So like David Arias is the coordinator at Southern Pines. A guy named Jack Lundgren is at Seven Lakes. Eric Kelsch is Carthage. These are volunteers, members of Grace, who run the baptism volunteer teams at their respective campuses. And they handle all of the logistics, the service flow, all of those things. They serve the families, and it's really cool to see all that. Whereas me, kind of where I play is I'm the guy preaching the word and interviewing people, but the teams do everything else, you know? And so it's really cool to be a part of that and help build that. But yeah, man, we ask anyone at Grace. Baptism weekend is one of the best services we do at Grace.
There's something special about it, but it's sort of intangible. You know what I mean?
It is.
Like on the surface, you're just getting dunked in some water.
Right.
And candidly, sometimes, and you can tell, people just kind of get dunked. Like they don't come out with some bright shining light on them and right. All their weights dropped. And it's just not always like that. But there's something special about it.
Something happening on the inside.
Yeah. Well, I think really just even making the decision to do that, I think that's, I'm speaking as a layperson here, but I think maybe that's just where it is. That's where the heart of it lives. When you make the decision, I want to do this outward display. Mm-hmm. Just like I'm kind of like I said a second ago, I'm saying this into the mic because it'll be a nightmare to edit out. I'm holding myself accountable. Kind of like, like hold yourself accountable. I believe this is real to me.
Yeah. So
I'm going to proclaim it.
Yes.
And publicly, you know what I mean?
And it's real to God.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. And I mean, gosh, we could get into the whole conversation of like the theology of baptism and, and the significance of that and what all that means spiritually and biblically. But baptisms at Grace Church are pretty special. And I cannot take any credit. Yes, I work hard and I've, by the grace of God, been able to grow it. But a lot of it honestly comes from the vision of Ryan, because Ryan came up to me one day and he says, man, I would love to make baptism weekend surrounding the stories, like make it about the stories and the testimonies, prioritize that somehow, squeeze it in there. We wanted the service to be less of something that people observe and more of something that they can immerse themselves into and be invited into people's lives. And so that's when we started incorporating what I call the NASCAR interviews.
Oh, yeah.
You know, where I stand there. Yeah. I stand there with the mic and I'm like, hey,
accurate.
tell us your name, who's baptizing you, tell us why you're getting baptized. And dude, like just to hear people's stories, man. And so backing up, so a week before the services, we do orientation. And at orientation, we tell everyone like, hey, we want to hear your story. You know, now sometimes people freak out because they're like, oh, I got to speak in front of hundreds of people. You know, they get stage fright, and that's fine. Even the kids get all nervous, and that's totally understandable. But every time we do orientation, I'm reminding everyone like, hey, the Bible says that we overcome the enemy by two things: the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And when we speak what God has done in our lives, what that does is that it makes Jesus more real to people, and it builds their faith. That's the power of testimonies. And yes, it is emotional, but it's not just that. It's spiritual, it's biblical, it's real, it's very human. And there's all those elements play together at the same time, and it just makes for an amazing experience. And I'll say this too. This encouraged me a lot, actually. So when I want to say, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we had a couple of staff members. They kind of like did like a TDY trip to a different church in Texas. They went there for a conference, and they were there to learn some things about guest services and guest connection and all of that. And while they were there now this is a mega church in Texas. It's actually a church I know about because they were down the road from where I used to live. And they were explaining how they were a part, that they had the opportunity to witness one of their baptism services. And this particular staff member said that they have nothing on Grace Church, which I was like, that's cool. Like, I didn't want that to puff me up at all, or Grace Church, but it was cool to hear that, in the sense of we do things uniquely, you know. And when our baptism services, it's not just about the water, it's not just about the dunking. Like, yes, it is. That's an element, but more than that, it's about hearing what God is doing in people's lives, and then following that with the baptism is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like it's surrender.
Yeah.
But it's like upfront, this is why I'm surrendering.
Yeah.
And then just the act of doing it, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Because it's awkward to be soaking wet in front of everybody on camera, knowing it's on the,
right.
But again, surrender. Like, this is why I'm doing this.
Yeah. And what's cool is, so when I got water baptized, when I went back in Chi Alpha, so get this, I was baptized in the Holy Spirit before I was water baptized. And that wasn't on purpose. That's just how things played out for me. But I got water baptized in the spring of 2011. And the way Chi Alpha did their baptism services was a lot like how we do it. We sit in the water, and then the microphone is handed to us, and the pastor would ask, hey, tell us why you're getting baptized. And just to hear people's stories and reasons why, and then it's just awesome, man. And tears and glory and all that stuff. And man, some of the stories you hear are wild, man. Like, there's abuse, there's addiction, there's abandonment, there's oh my gosh, there's this one baptism that happened where this dude, I don't know if you were there for this, you might remember, but he shared how his father was murdered, and he witnessed that.
No, I don't remember that.
He witnessed his father being murdered, and he had so much, for obvious reasons, so much resentment, bitterness, anger towards that person, but also the situation. And just to see him give it all over to Jesus, man, and then getting baptized. And so going back to you saying, like, it's real, bro, it's real, you know, like that, it's possible, and only Jesus can make that happen, you know, reconciliation, you know.
Yeah.
It's wild.
That is wild, man. It's yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because, like I said, that was one of the coolest moments that I've witnessed in any church, really. It's just so sincere. I could just tell that it just, again, being there, you know it's real. You can kind of feel it in the room, but then just seeing the reaction, it's like, oh man, that was a special moment.
It's special. It's special. And then I'll share this too. So being the baptism guy at Grace, and thank God we were able to do this. But one of my dreams was to do a baptism weekend that wasn't just about water baptism, but it was about the baptism of the Holy Spirit.
Oh, just a few weeks ago.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's always been in my back pocket. I was like, I really would love to do this. And I remember sitting down with Ryan one day, because Ryan invited me to speak that weekend, and I was praying into what I was going to speak into, and God kept reminding me about this desire that I had about the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and making that like a quasi baptism weekend. And so I sat down with Ryan at the outdoor cafe, and I was sharing with him my vision, my plan, and he was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And what the timing of it was cool because Ryan invited me to speak on the very first Sunday of the year. I mean, we're talking right on the heels of New Year's, and just to start off the year with people getting baptized in the Spirit, that was cool.
That's a good way to do it.
That was cool. Yeah, and that it kind of messed some people up, man, like in a good way, because people. I think for the most part, people know that Grace Church is Spirit filled, but in a lot of ways, we weren't very overt about it. We weren't very deliberate and speaking on the gifts of the Spirit and the baptism of the Holy Spirit. People would see the spiritual gifts at work, but in the back of their minds, they had questions and doubts and curiosities. And so to preach on that was awesome because it, in a lot of ways, it gave a lot of spiritual clarity as to where Grace Church stands with this kind of stuff, and frankly, what the Bible says about it. But more than that, giving people the opportunity to come up and have hands laid on and receive the spiritual gifts and all of that. And it was special, man. It was good. And then not just that, but the podcast that I did with Dan Lyle after that, dude, that was cool. And so many people listened to that because it was like a part B to the service, And we had so many questions come in for that podcast. It was very good.
Woke some people up.
Yes. Yeah, man. And it also kind of frustrated people too, and it's kind of sad to say, but not like it's our goal to frustrate and make sure people believe the right things, but it got people to think. It got people to ask questions. To get in the Bible. I think that's what's most important. It got people in the Bible. It got people to seek and at the very least just be curious, because otherwise it's like sometimes you just got to shake it up, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a pressure test. That's something that has also been brought up a few times here. It's so weird, man. The same kind of themes keep coming up. But it makes sense. It's again, I'm trying to let God lead all these conversations. So, hey, if the same themes are coming up, then I guess he's got something he wants to hear about it.
Yeah.
But that's another thing that has been talked about a couple times, the pressure test, like believing, like, do you really believe? How do you know? Pressure test it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, get uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's
like,
good.
Try to disprove yourself.
Yeah.
Pressure test it. And if it stands, then you really believe it. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just going along to get along,
Mm-hmm.
Hey, yeah, I believe that. Yeah, sure. You say, yeah, I believe it. I trust you. Whatever you say, I believe.
Yeah.
Put it through the fire, like you said. Refine it a little bit,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. And Scripture warns about that too, because I think Paul wrote when he wrote to Timothy, he says, hey man, in the last days, people are going to acquire teachers for themselves to tickle their ears, and feed them the doctrine they want to hear. It's like
preach you I'm paraphrasing, but like the gospel of wine and alcohol and things like that, right? Like that's
right.
You would love that, right? That's basically what he's saying.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And anyway, so I guess if we're going to wrap up this, there's a quick admin thing, and then just kind of have a final question. But it's nothing crazy. Just kind of a final wrap up question. Just kind of curious. But
yeah. Oh, dude. Come on, man. Whoa, this is cool. I love this. Oh, number 4, man.
Number 4, man. There you go.
That's super cool. I'm going to, you know what? So I have a coin display in my office at Grace. I'm going to put this on there.
Oh, dude, that's very cool. Yeah.
Dude, thank you. This is cool.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I appreciate you again, we don't even have anything out yet as at the time of this recording. So it takes a lot more when, and this being the person who's walking through it, it takes a lot more to make the decision to come sit down with somebody and you don't even know what the thing's going to be. You know what I mean? Like I appreciate the confidence is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so, of course, dude.
We appreciate it. So
well, thanks for the invite.
Oh, of course.
This is fun.
Of course. Okay. So final question, and it's a little weird, man. I don't mean to get kind of like, again, kind of granola, but we've talked a lot about or I guess I've talked a lot about just essentially like you just don't, you the finality of life, like you just don't know how much time you have.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I'm trying to spit out there. You don't know how much sand is left in the hourglass.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it, again, it's something that weighs very heavy on my heart constantly. Mm-hmm. And I think it probably weighs a little heavy on your heart as well. So I'm just kind of curious, even if I'm wrong about that assumption, what do you want to do before you die?
That's a great question. Very good question. Not weird at all. Man, I think given the things that I've been given, like the fact that I'm a father and I have children, and a spouse, there's people that I'm responsible to. And I think, man, well, I think the Christian churchy answer would be like, yeah, please Jesus and do all that. And yes, all of that. But I think the one thing that I want to be most successful in before leaving this earth is just being a devoted father, and a devoted husband, Oh man, the very last verse in the Old Testament, which is Malachi chapter 4, literally it's the very last verse that closes the Old Testament. God gives a prophecy through Malachi, and he says, a time is coming where I'm going to turn the hearts of fathers back to their children, and the hearts of children back to their fathers, their parents, and then after that, there's 400 years of silence before Jesus is born, and things start being fulfilled. And, God is a father, and he has the heart of a father. And in a lot of ways, I want to capture as much as possible what that heart is like for my kids, as far as being a husband to my wife, and so I think, if I'm a successful pastor, whatever that means, great. If I'm a successful this, that, whatever, great. But I think, when you talk about legacy, the people that are continuing on your influence, it's really through your family. And so, with that being said, I think there's a lot of to be said about living your life in a way where you're stewarding the things you're handing off to that generation that's coming in after you the best way you can, And I think, God has taught me a lot about himself, and I've experienced him in very unique ways. And in my heart of hearts, man, my chief prime desire is to have others, especially my family, experience and learn about God like that, and I trust he's going to do it. Yeah.
It's a good goal, man.
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks again, Keith. I really appreciate you coming out, man.
Of course, man. Thank you.
I'll let you know when it's up.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome, dude.